Chapter 1086. In this world, there are supreme sages who control everything. Under the sages, there are many disciples of the sages. I am just a small cultivator, and my cultivation has barely reached the pinnacle of the quasi-sage level. My strength is insignificant, and I cannot shoulder such a heavy responsibility. Luo Fan said calmly. The exalted saints are high and mighty. They wouldn't care about a small matter like the exalted demon lord's mischief. As for the disciples of the sages, they could roughly guess from the realm of the kid who had left earlier that they were at the second or third level. How could they resist the projection of the supreme demon venerable at such a level? If you don't act now, the consequences of the supreme demon lord will be thousands of times more severe than you can imagine. Countless lives will be plunged into a disaster. Tianhunzi tried to persuade Luo Fan. Even the sages don't care. Why should I care? Luo Fan's expression remained indifferent. All right, if you don't need me to stabilize this formation, I'll leave by myself. With that, he didn't want to waste any more words with Tianhunzi, so he directly interrupted the Tianhunzi. Tianhunzi was blocked by Luo Fan's words, and he could not help but feel a little helpless for a moment. He was stunned for a moment before saying, "There's no need for a fixed formation. I'm just a memory that's operating right now. I don't even have a self, so what's the point of existing for a long time? Moreover, even if the formation was fixed, I would need to wake up every 10 million years. Once 100 years had passed, I would not be able to wake up. I need to dissipate naturally so that my remnant won't suffer irreparable damage. Next time, if we want to condense it, we will need someone to activate the formation, so this matter is meaningless." "I see. In that case, I shall take my leave." Luo Fan cupped his hands together towards Tianhunzi and said. With that, he turned to leave. When Tianhun saw this, he hurriedly said, "Wait a moment. Do you know what kind of world the demon realm is? If you can refine the projection of the supreme demon lord, you'll be able to find the path to the demon world through this projection. By then, you'll be able to obtain great benefits." Luo Fan stopped in his tracks. "Turn around. Isn't the demon world a space-time condensed from the remnant energy of the Great Tribulation? It's filled with the power of destruction. How can ordinary living beings like us gain any benefits from entering it? So this matter has already been buried in the river of time." Tianhunzi was stunned when he heard Luo Fan's words. He sighed with emotion. "I'd like to hear the details." Luo Fan frowned. The demon world. In the beginning, it was indeed just a space-time that gathered the remnant power of the Great Tribulation. However, after countless years of development, it had already become a nearly perfect world. Moreover, because this world was condensed from the power of the Great Tribulation, it contained countless rules and laws that surpassed the world. These rules and laws were of great significance to cultivators. Regardless of which Tao one cultivated, one would be able to obtain enlightenment from these laws, and it allowed one's attainments in the Tao to obtain an extremely great improvement. Therefore, it was a great thing for experts to be able to enter it. In my era, almost every disciple of a sage had entered the demon world to train, Tianhunzi explained. Rules and laws that surpass the world. Luo Fan's heart suddenly pounded when he heard that. He had a strange feeling that the reason for the existence of the demon world might be more complicated than what Tianhunzi had said. The secrets hidden within might be even more shocking. The Great Tribulation was born from a state of chaos. It was a test that the state of chaos carried out for the perfect world that existed within it. As long as a perfect world could survive 9 consecutive Great Tribulations, it could grow into a great world that could give birth to countless sages. It could even give birth to cultivators that surpassed the sages. For a perfect world that could only withstand the cultivation of a few sages to grow into a great world that could withstand the cultivation of countless sages, one could imagine how huge the gap was. Evidently, the things that supported the existence of such a gap could only be brought about by the Great Tribulation. Therefore, the Great Tribulation definitely contained many rules and laws that surpassed the normal perfect world. Therefore, the demon world that was formed from the remnant energy of the Great Tribulation must also contain many such rules and laws. With these thoughts in mind, Luo Fan knew that Tian Hunzi was probably telling the truth. Entering the devil realm was an extremely beneficial thing for him and any powerhouse. He stood there as thoughts flashed through his mind. After a while, he finally made up his mind and said, "It seems like the projection of the Supreme Demon Lord will wake up. How long more will it take?" That's hard to say. Maybe billions of years, maybe millions of years, or maybe hundreds of years. It all depends on when the Great Tribulation arrives, Tian Hunzi said. So you're watching the Great Tribulation. It seems like there's still a lot of time. Currently, it was no longer a secret when the great calamity of the world would arrive. According to the timing of the great calamity of the world, there would still be over 30 billion years before the projection of the Supreme Demon Venerate would wake up. Calculating like this, there was still time. Therefore, Luo Fan said, if that's the case, then there's still more than 3 billion years before the projection of the Supreme Demon Lord wakes up. Even if I want to enter the demon world, there's no rush. Let's wait for me to travel for a few billion years and increase my strength first. With that, he was about to leave. Tian Hunzi saw that and hurriedly said, "That's what you say. But the closer we get to the Great Tribulation, the more powerful the projection of the Supreme Demon Lord will be, and the more difficult it will be to deal with. Moreover, the demon world will become more dangerous by then. I think it's better to refine it as soon as possible and enter the demon world as soon as possible. Moreover, if we wait until the Great Tribulation before entering, things will probably change drastically. By then, the entire demon world might open its door and invade the world. How will we have the time for you to enter and train?" Luo Fan Zi shook his head and said, "If there's no chance, then forget it. I can't deal with the projection of the Supreme Demon Lord before I increase my strength to its peak. You keep talking about the benefits of entering the demon world, but why are you hiding this secret so deeply? It's obvious that it's too dangerous to enter the demon world. So the saints and the disciples of the saints are consciously trying to prevent this from spreading. If I don't have enough strength to enter, then I'll be courting death. I definitely won't do such a thing." With that, he didn't care about Tian Hunzi anymore and lifted his foot. His figure instantly disappeared on the spot. When he reappeared, he was already at the barrier of the dojo. He was here with his original body, so be it cultivation realm or strength, he was at the level of a Tao master. After he knew the difference between the external space-time and the internal space-time, how could it affect him? The scale of the entire space-time. To him, it was as if it didn't exist. Naturally, he easily crossed it with one step. When he arrived at the barrier of the dojo, Tian Hunzi's figure appeared in front of him at the same time and said, "Wait. Since you want to increase your strength to its peak before refining the projection of the Supreme Demon Lord, and I can't stop you, I'll give you a hand to save time. Otherwise, this dojo would have become a vassal of the demon world by the time you arrive." With that, he raised his hand and gestured in the void. The entire dojo shook slightly, and a sparkling and translucent crystal appeared in front of Luo Fan. This crystal was similar to the crystal he had obtained in the Divine Sun's dojo. Apart from a slight difference in color, it didn't look much different. This is my lifetime's understanding of Tao and my lifetime's cultivation experience. I hope it can help you avoid taking detours. Tian Hunzi sighed. Looking at the crystal, Luo Fan couldn't help but feel grateful to Tian Hunzi. He took the crystal and bowed to Tian Hunzi, saying, "Thank you for your help. If I'm successful in my cultivation, I'll definitely come here." Tian Hunzi waved his hand and said, Go. If you don't return within 100 years, then come back again in 10 million years. I hope you'll have the confidence to deal with the Supreme Demon Lord by then." "I'm quite confident about that." Luo Fan smiled. With that, he bade farewell and took a step forward. His figure gently floated out of Tian Hunzi's dojo. The entire process was completely smooth, and he did not feel like he had crossed any barrier at all. He had already left the dojo and arrived at the universe on Earth before the world had shattered. Looking back, there was only a void behind him, and there was no trace of the dojo at all. The Supreme Demon Lord, the Demon World, I'm really looking forward to it. Luo Fan thought to himself. He took out the piece of dojo certificate that he had obtained from the Divine Sun's dojo, which looked like a stone slab. After identifying it, he took a light step forward, and his figure turned into a long rainbow as he flew into the distance. His flying speed was extremely fast. In just a few breaths, he had already crossed a distance of billions of miles and arrived at a void that was extremely far away from Tian Hunzi's dojo. When he arrived, he stopped and his figure transformed again. After sensing slightly, he was sure that this was the place he was looking for. In front of him was the door to the Divine Sun's dojo. As long as he held the certificate, he wouldn't need to use any power or break through space-time to enter the dojo easily. Just as he was about to step inside, Luo Fan suddenly had a thought and thought to himself, this is outside the Divine Sun's dojo. The Divine Sun didn't die in the dojo, so I thought he must be in the universe on Earth. Now, it seems that apart from this possibility, he might also be in the demon world. Let me take a look first. With that thought, he stopped his original thoughts and landed on the boundless sea of clouds below. The sea of clouds seemed boundless and as thick as the earth, but it was actually just a product formed by the condensation of various kinds of water vapor and vitality. Its essence was extremely illusory. It could be blown away by the wind. It was not a real ocean, nor could it support the weight of a heavy object. However, an existence like Luo Fan was already equivalent to a Tao master at the peak of the sage-to-be realm. His cultivation realm and strength had reached an incredible level. If he wanted to change something that was illusory in nature, it would only take a thought. For example, at this moment, he didn't even need to use any special means. He just pressed his body down and stepped on the sea of clouds. The sea of clouds around him naturally solidified and became something like an elastic ground, easily supporting him. Stepping on the sea of clouds, Luo Fan didn't stop. He condensed a three-dimensional talisman in his hand, pointed at the sea of clouds, and began to draw in the air. Following his drawing, those three-dimensional talismans were thrown into the sea of clouds one by one. Gradually, a complicated formation that covered an area of tens of thousands of meters was formed in the sea of clouds. When he threw the last three-dimensional talisman into the sea of clouds, the entire formation suddenly lit up with endless, dazzling light. This light was so shocking and so mysterious that it seemed to pierce through the endless space and time. It was filled with all the rules. Many peak of the sage-to-be in the entire Earth universe couldn't help but raise their heads and look in this direction. So he's there. I'll let you have fun for a while. When I get out, I'll definitely teach you a lesson. In a dojo given by another sage, a Taoist who was being suppressed by a huge staff said angrily. This person was Wu Daozi. Previously, he was suppressed by the battle god Sun who had just broken through and couldn't even move. Now, with the help of the Enlightenment Cottage and the Enlightenment Futon, he was much better than before. At least he could integrate his perception with the Qilin Cliff and use the Qilin Cliff to perceive the various things in the Earth universe. It was also because of this that he was able to discover what Luo Fan was doing. But what is he doing? It seems like he's collecting something invisible. Wu Daozi was curious after his anger subsided. After all, he was a disciple of a sage. Although he was only at the second step below the sage level, his knowledge was quite extraordinary. Although he hadn't seen what Luo Fan was doing, he could roughly guess the nature of this technique through its various performances. At the same time, many similar guesses were being made in other areas. However, no matter how much they guessed, they didn't know what Luo Fan was trying to do. Even those who were more knowledgeable could guess that Luo Fan was collecting the remnant will of a certain living being, but they couldn't guess whose remnant will he was collecting. After all, the Divine Suns had long been submerged in the long river of time. Billions of years were enough to erase all traces of the past. Luo Fan didn't care about what others thought. Although he hadn't reached the point where he didn't need to care about anything, he really didn't need to care about any other cultivators apart from the disciples of the sages. Obviously, He was friends with most of the disciples of the sages. Even those who weren't friends had concerns about each other. Under such circumstances, even if they discovered what he was doing, they definitely wouldn't stop him. That was why he had set up this array, to collect the remnant will of the Son of God from the entire Earth's universe without hiding it at all. The light spread across the universe and constantly cleansed the void, looking for the remnant will of the divine sons. This process lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. After 3 days and 3 nights, Luo Fan finally stopped the formation helplessly. The light that spread across the universe became invisible, and the formation formed by the three-dimensional talismans completely dissipated. How could this be? Luo Fan looked helpless, but he was extremely shocked. Although he had activated the formation with all his might over the past 3 days and 3 nights, and searched every inch of the void in the Earth universe for the remnant will of the divine sons, he didn't find any at all in the end. Not only was there no remnant will of the divine sons, but there was also no remnant will of the other living beings. The entire world was clean and smooth, as if no living beings had ever died. This was obviously impossible. In any part of the world, death was occurring at every moment. Since there was death, there should naturally be remnant will. Even the most ordinary living beings would leave behind some remnant will after they died. Although the remnant will of ordinary living beings existed for a very short time and could completely dissipate in a few days, it still existed. In a situation where there were living beings dying all the time, there should naturally be an immeasurable remnant of will existing in the world at all times. However, during these 3 days and 3 nights, what Luo Fan sensed was the complete opposite. The world was as good as new at all times. There was no remnant will at all, let alone finding the remnant will of the divine sons. Could it be the work of the saints? Where did the remnant will go? Was it completely eliminated, or was it sent somewhere else? As Luo Fan thought about this, he suddenly felt a huge shadow shrouding the entire world, the entire universe, and the river of time from ancient times to the present, making him feel as if he had fallen into a quagmire and could not get out. There must be a deeper secret behind this. Luo Fan raised his hand and patted the sea of clouds below him. The entire sea of clouds returned to its original appearance. His figure rushed straight up and directly left the sea of clouds. When he arrived in midair, he didn't immediately enter the dojo of the divine sons. Instead, he fixed his gaze on the huge battlefield that was taking place tens of millions of miles away from here. Chapter 1087. Since Luo Fan was able to set up a formation that gathered the remnants of wills, he naturally only needed to change his eyes slightly to clearly see the remnants of wills that existed in the void. He was currently paying attention to this battlefield because he wanted to find where the remnants of wills had disappeared. Unfortunately, although there were hundreds and thousands of people dying at every moment, Luo fans will had observed the entire battle until the end. Even after more than half of the tens of millions of people from the 3 sides had died, he still did not find any traces of the remnants of wills. It was as if their deaths had caused all of their existences to dissipate into thin air, leaving no remnants of wills behind. This situation was obviously not the real truth. Luo Fan was unwilling to give up, so he turned his gaze to the bodies of the mortals who were fighting. He paid attention to their souls, their wills, and wanted to see what happened at the moment of their death. He was able to see some things as he looked. He saw that the moment the Nair mortals died, their souls completely shattered. They then shrank inwards and disappeared without a trace, as if they had never existed. It was obvious that they had been transferred to another place under the effect of some unimaginable mechanism. At the very least, they were no longer in the universe that Luo Fan had sensed on Earth. Could this really be the work of a saint? Luo Fan thought to himself, and finally gave up on trying to find the whereabouts of the remnants of wills. He sighed, lifted his foot, and took a light step forward, directly entering the dojo of the divine sun in front of him. As soon as he entered the dojo, he felt the light and shadows around him change, and his body was directly transferred to a strange tree-shaped space-time by some mysterious mechanism. Here, his clone projection was suspended in mid-air with his legs crossed. Not far away, the teleportation tree door was shrouded in a layer of golden light, and the light of merit shone around it. It was obvious that it had already transformed this space-time and was now receiving the boundless merit from this dojo. Seeing this, Luo Fan smiled and raised his hand to point at his clone projection. In an instant, the clone projection had already turned into a ray of light and shot towards him, instantly fusing into his body as if it had never appeared. Still a little short. Suddenly, the golden light faded, and the teleportation tree door sighed. Luo Fan looked over. The teleportation tree gate's face was full of regret, and its body was still somewhat illusory. Although the merit light wheel behind its head was condensed to a shocking degree, and it was greatly improved for what he had seen before, there was not much change in its essence. Obviously, during this period of time, when Luo Fan wasn't paying attention to it, although he had mended many parts of the world, he still hadn't obtained a qualitative improvement. He hadn't turned his spirit stone into reality and transcended the shackles of his body. Luo Fan was currently here with his main body. His strength and realm were much stronger than the previous avatar projection. After a little calculation, he knew that according to the current trend, the Luo Fan realm would be much stronger. The teleportation tree gate needed to repair at least 36,000 space-times before it could obtain enough merit to transcend the shackles. Shaking his head, he raised his hand and casually placed a complicated and abstruse three-dimensional talisman around him, forming a small cave that isolated the inside from the outside. Then he took out two crystal-clear crystals and placed them side by side in front of him. Of the two crystals, one was replicated from the depths of the Divine Sun of Ti's dojo, and it contained the Divine Sun of Ti's lifetime of understanding and experience. The other was the understanding and experience of Tion Hunzi. There was a huge difference between the Divine Sun of Ti and Tion Hunzi. One specialized in the body, while the other specialized in the soul. While there was a huge conflict between the two, they complemented each other. This was just like their dojos. There was such a huge conflict, but there was such a close connection between them. The space inside the small cave that he had built was extremely vast. The surrounding stars made him feel like he was in the universe. From the outside, he seemed to be enveloped by a light shield with a diameter of 30 feet. After the teleportation tree gate finished absorbing the merit, it noticed the changes in Luo Fan. With a slight sense, it already knew everything that had just happened. It knew that Luo Fan was no longer as weak as before, and for a moment, it couldn't help but feel envious. If I could also cultivate, I wouldn't be any worse than him now. This thought instantly flashed through the teleportation tree gate's mind. After this thought flashed through his mind, he eliminated all kinds of distracting thoughts and began to move. He arrived in front of another light screen and began to repair the next space-time. However, Luo Fan wasn't in the mood to care about the teleportation tree gate at the moment. He looked at the two crystals in front of him, and all kinds of thoughts kept flashing through his mind. After a while, he finally made a decision. With a slight thought, he raised his hand and sketched in the void. The surrounding stars sparkled, and as he sketched, a huge and complicated three-dimensional talisman was formed in the blink of an eye, shining in the void. After the three-dimensional talisman appeared, it began to change on its own without the need for Luo Fan to sketch. As it changed, there seemed to be countless mysterious messages appearing out of thin air in the three-dimensional talisman, making it seem like the three-dimensional talisman was telling everything in the world and the chaos of the universe. Next, the two crystals in front of Luo Fan suddenly floated up and directly turned into two rays of light that shot into the three-dimensional talisman that was formed by stars. It was as if they had instantly become two nodes of the complicated three-dimensional talisman. At this moment, the three-dimensional talisman exuded an indescribable aura. This aura was majestic, containing a kind of supreme charm, as well as a feeling of eternity. It was like an existence that was extremely close to a sage. This aura directly seeped out of the small cave abode that Luo Fan had set up and instantly filled the entire tree-shaped space-time. The teleportation tree gate had originally begun to repair the space-time, but it was suddenly shrouded by this aura. It instantly recovered from its state of repair, and its eyes revealed a look of disbelief. This is Master's aura. No, it's not just Master. There's another aura that's also very familiar. That's the aura of Tian Hunzi. How is this possible? How can he have such an aura? Master has disappeared for more than 7 billion years. His aura can't possibly be left until now. The expression on the teleportation tree gate's face was complicated. It was a little surprised, but it was even more horrified. If its master had returned, then its method of transcending the shackles of its body would have been a betrayal. That was betrayal. If his master cared about it, then what awaited him would be the complete obliteration of his spiritual consciousness that he had painstakingly produced. How could it not be horrified? No, it's not that Master has returned. This is because fellow Taoists used a special method to reconstruct Master's understanding and experience. The appearance of Tian Hunzi's aura should also be due to a similar reason. After a long while, the teleportation tree gate finally sensed clearly and could not help but relax. After relaxing, it felt a little disappointed. Previously, when it thought that its master's return would bring it bad luck, its heart was only filled with fear. However, now that it knew that its master could not return, it remembered how good its master was. For a moment, it only felt nostalgia for its master, and it felt a little sad that its master could not return. After a long while, it calmed down and no longer cared about Luo Fan. Instead, it focused its attention on repairing the space-time. However, compared to before, it no longer felt agitated and impatient. Instead, it faintly felt like letting nature take its course. Naturally, Luo Fan did not know that his actions had shocked the teleportation tree gate. At this moment, he raised his head and looked at the three-dimensional talisman formed by the stars and the void that was undergoing changes. The way he used the three-dimensional talisman was more as a carrier of information. It was just that it was not a carrier for communicating with living beings, but a carrier for communicating with the world, with all things, with chaos, and with everything. It was normal. Luo Fan poured the characters he had sketched into those 3D seals, pouring the information into those 3D seals one word at a time. Now, he directly poured information into the three-dimensional talisman with the help of the two crystals. The two crystals were originally a combination of experience and comprehension. In essence, it was also a combination of information. It was not much different from the words that Luo Fuan usually sketched. Under such circumstances, it could naturally be poured into the three-dimensional talisman. Due to the addition of the crystals, the three-dimensional talisman would evolve and eventually become an extremely mysterious existence. The various things contained in the two crystals would be cast on the three-dimensional talisman in another way, so that Luo Fan could comprehend it in another way. The two crystals were condensed from information. It could condense illusory and invisible information into such a real existence. The amount of information contained in it could be imagined. Although the three-dimensional talisman had a wonderful structure, one could imagine how complicated the evolution process would be to incorporate all the information into it. The evolution process was complicated, so the time needed would obviously increase naturally. It could not be completed immediately. Luo Fan floated in the center of the cave abode and looked at the extremely subtle and complicated changes that were happening to the three-dimensional talisman around him. There was a kind of anticipation in his eyes. According to his deduction, when the three-dimensional talisman finished evolving, it would form two vast spacetimes. Everything that happened in these two spacetimes was completely based on the experience and comprehension of Divine Son, of Ti and Tian Hunzi. It would constantly evolve from the beginning to the end, allowing him to step into it directly and personally comprehend their experience and comprehension. It would be easier for him to obtain what he needed. The evolution process lasted for quite a long time. It took a full 100 days before the evolution was finally completed. By then, the entire three-dimensional talisman was completely invisible. The inside of the cave abode had become a boundless void. The many stars in it had already disappeared without a trace. The only things left in the void were two strange light gates. The two light doors were very stable and simple. The auras of Divine Son of T and Tion Hunzi could be sensed from the light doors, and they were unprecedentedly real and intuitive. It seemed as if Tion Hunzi and Divine Son of T were standing right in front of him. These were the entrances to the two space-times, which were also the two sides of the three-dimensional talisman. It's finally done. Let me see what the inside of the two space-times looks like. Luo Fan smiled and took a step forward, directly stepping into the light door that was emitting the aura of Divine Son of T. The moment he stepped in, he felt that all his power had completely disappeared. In a trance, he had already become a small child standing in front of a huge mountain. Luo Fan looked down at his body and felt the power in his body. He knew that he had probably become the original Divine Son of T. It's really amazing. Am I going to experience everything as the Divine Son of T? It seemed to be pretty good. I wonder how the Divine Son of T will behave when he sees a sage in the future. Will he really see a sage? Will I condense a sage's imprint because of this? Luo Fan thought expectantly as he walked towards the top of the huge mountain in front of him step by step. This huge mountain was hundreds of thousands of feet high. It was an unimaginable mountain for any ordinary person, let alone a 3-year-old child. Luo Fan instinctively knew that there was something attracting him at the top of this mountain. As long as he could climb to the top of the mountain, he would be able to step onto the path of cultivation. From there, he would have the opportunity to become a supreme immortal, travel freely between the heavens and earth, and enjoy eternal life. It seems that back then, the Divine Son of T climbed up step by step like this. I don't know what he has experienced before. He is only 3 years old, yet he has already developed such a strong obsession with cultivation. Luo Fan thought to himself as he controlled his body to move forward step by step. The Divine Son of Ti's body was very talented. Although he was only 3 years old, his power was not much different from that of a 17 or 18-year-old youth. Although this mountain was hundreds of thousands of feet high, it was extremely shocking and incredible. It was extremely shocking and inconceivable, but in the end, after walking and stopping for a month, he climbed to the top of the mountain. Along the way, he ate a lot of spirit flowers and spirit fruits. When he reached the top of the mountain, his body had gone through another round of tempering. He had become several times stronger than before he climbed up the mountain. The moment he climbed to the top of the mountain, a voice came to the ears of the Divine Son of T, who was currently Luo Fan. Good child, are you willing to be my disciple and learn the skills of immortals from me? Without needing Luo Fan's control, the Divine Son of Ti's body naturally knelt down and said, I am willing. Then, he looked up and saw an extremely holy and ethereal figure standing in front of him with his back to the sun. This person is only an itinerant immortal. Luo Fan saw this person with the Divine Son of Ti's body. He instantly knew the strength of this person. For a moment, he couldn't help but sigh at the Divine Son of Ti's good luck. Although he was only an itinerant immortal cultivator, he was still an immortal. To be able to become the disciple of an immortal when he had just stepped onto the path of cultivation was already an unimaginable opportunity for the Divine Son of T. After all, for normal people, it was already very lucky to be able to become the disciple of a level 4 or level 5 cultivator when they first stepped onto the path of cultivation. Next, Luo Fan didn't forcibly control the Divine Son of Ti's body. Instead, he watched as the Divine Son of T began to cultivate with the Taoist like a bystander. This mountain was just a very ordinary mountain peak. The Yuan Qi was not very rich, and the various resources were not very good either. The master of the Divine Son of T was just an ordinary itinerant immortal. In the entire universe on Earth, this was nothing at all. Therefore, his style was rather low-key. The cultivation method that the Divine Son of Ti's master taught him was the body cultivation method. Through various wonderful methods, the body would be constantly tempered and eventually become stronger. Eventually, it would break through one limit after another and eventually surpass the mortal realm and reach the immortal realm. Because the Taoist himself was only an itinerant immortal, the process of the body cultivation method only reached the itinerant immortal realm. The divine son of Ti followed his master to cultivate on this mountain. After 30 years, he reached the peak of the mortal realm. At this time, the divine son of Ti's master took him to a place that was extremely beneficial for body cultivation. He planned to fight for some opportunities for him so that he could break through his limit and reach the immortal realm. It was during this process that an accident occurred. On this day, Luo Fan suddenly felt a sense of danger. His heart trembled. He knew that the peace of the past 30 years was about to be broken, so he tensed up. At this moment, a long rainbow descended from the sky and bombarded the ground. It produced an intense light that exploded from the point of impact and began to spread in all directions. It directly shook the ground and the void, making the divine son of Ti feel as if the end of the world had arrived. The divine son of Ti's master roared angrily at this moment. The power around him surged, and the power of the immortal path exploded, forming layers of defense to protect himself and the divine son of Ti. However, this light was simply too terrifying. It far exceeded the limits of what an itinerant immortal realm could withstand. In an instant, it broke through the layers of defense and directly tore the divine son of Ti's master apart, causing him to die in front of the divine son of Ti. At this moment, Luo Fan realized that the whole world had become illusory. It was as if the whole world had suddenly ceased to exist. The entire process of the divine son of Ti's master being torn apart suddenly became extremely slow, as if it had been slowed down tens of thousands of times. He looked around and realized that the whole world around him was only left with boundless light. I see. This incident must have left the deepest impression in the divine son of Ti's heart. He couldn't maintain his composure every time he thought about it. Even the world that he constructed couldn't take shape at all. All that was left was this scene that left the deepest impression on him. Luo Fan immediately understood the source of this change. However, thinking about it, this was normal. A 3-year-old child was protected by his master until he was in his 30s. The relationship between the two of them was so deep that it far exceeded that of a master and a disciple. It had already reached the level of a father and son. Chapter 1088. During this process, the power in the divine son of Ti's body suddenly increased by leaps and bounds. In the blink of an eye, he broke through the limits of the mortal realm and directly stepped into the individual immortal realm. His fleshly body, soul, and strength had all instantly obtained an improvement of countless times. The chi and blood in his body surged, and violent gang energy rushed out, crazily rushing around his body. A furious and shrill roar rushed out of his mouth, and the pain contained in it was truly shocking. At this moment, there seemed to be a strange force acting on his body, pushing him away from his original position and away from the remains of his master, who was like a father to him. Although this allowed him to avoid being injured by the light, it also forced him to leave his master. This caused him to be even more furious, even more sorrowful, and even more pained. At this time, Luo Fan was paying attention to the changes in the divine son of Ti's body. He sensed the change in his power in the process of breaking through from the mortal realm to the individual immortal realm. For a moment, he had a different kind of understanding. Of course, it was only a little. After all, this was only the change from the mortal realm to the individual immortal realm. For Luo Fan, who was already in the Tao Master realm, it was easy to imagine how useful it was. To be able to have such a little gain, it was already considered that the divine son of Ti's cultivation way was really exquisite. The divine son of Ti didn't know how long he had been in this state. When the surrounding light and shadow stabilized again, Luo Fan found that the surrounding time and space had changed, and the divine son of Ti's cultivation realm had reached the peak of the individual immortal realm. Even his whole person had changed completely. After a slight sensing, Luo Fan knew that it was already 1,000 years after that incident. The reason why it flashed by was obviously that these 1,000 years did not leave too many traces in the divine son of Ti's heart. There were not many memories left in the condensed body of his lifetime of understanding and experience. This was completely different from the 30 years when he went up the mountain and began to cultivate. In the first 30 years of cultivation, almost every day and every moment was deeply engraved in the crystal. It allowed Luo Fan to repeatedly sense and experience it repeatedly. From the difference between the two, one could see how deep the first 30 years had left a mark in the heart of the divine son of body. Am I going to break through again? After Luo Fan looked around, he knew why everything had returned to normal. It turned out that the divine son of Ti had experienced 1,000 years. Although he had been cultivating in a muddle-headed manner, he was finally about to break through the itinerant immortal realm and become a perfected immortal. No matter how he felt, no matter how much they didn't pay attention to it, for cultivator, the breakthrough of the cultivation realm would always occupy a place in their memories. Even though the divine son of God had been trying to find the truth and take revenge for his master for the past 1,000 years, this was the moment when he was about to make a breakthrough. It also pulled him out of that state of mind, allowing him to retain the process of breaking through in the crystal. The process of this breakthrough was very smooth. The stellar energy around him surged, and his chi and blood burst out, almost tearing the void apart. The entire process directly displayed the wonders of the cultivation of the Tao of the body incisively and vividly. The strength of his body after the breakthrough. Although it couldn't compare to the Tao fruit that Luo Fan's cultivation had created based on the world of laws when they were in the same realm, it was already dozens of times stronger than ordinary cultivation techniques. Such a breakthrough process allowed Luo Fan to have a deeper understanding of the Tao of the body. He even felt that it had touched his world of laws, allowing his world of laws to become a little more substantial. The world of laws was something that Luo Fan had sorted out based on all his experiences, his understanding of the world, and his understanding of chaos. It was a worldview that explained everything in the world, the state of chaos, and even the state before the state of chaos. This worldview had just been established, so although it was self-justifying and could barely explain everything, however, that didn't mean that this worldview was perfect as soon as it was established. In fact, this worldview still needed to be supplemented frequently, gradually enriching it on top of the basic worldview and making it more perfect. It could explain more things and more accurately explain various things. That was why there was a possibility of the worldview being enriched. Sensing this change, Luo Fan completely settled his mind and did not do anything else. He was just like a bystander, observing the changes in the divine son's body, the changes in his cultivation, the various comprehensions he had in the process of cultivation, and the various joys and sorrows he had experienced in the course of his life. Time passed slowly during this process. Unlike the 30 years before he first started cultivating, the time after he became a perfected immortal did not skip as quickly as the 1,000 years when he was an itinerant immortal, but it was no longer as detailed as before. Instead, there were frequent jumps. Sometimes months, years, or even decades and centuries would pass in the blink of an eye. Sometimes he would feel that 1 second was thousands of seconds. Although all sorts of things were strange and even absurd, they vaguely contained a certain strange rhythm. The thing that controlled this rhythm was the improvement of his cultivation realm and the progress of his cultivation. When the divine son finally broke through the primordial unity pure yang realm and became an innate grand Luo, more than 10 million years had passed. After becoming an innate grand Luo, the divine son only felt a sense of perfection and freedom. His physical body had also become unbelievably powerful. The chi and blood in his body had even evolved a strange world in his body, displaying a deeper change in the way of the physical body. This made Luo Fan realize a lot. He suddenly felt that the use of his physical body seemed to be a little crude, and he did not fully unleash the power of his physical body. This understanding naturally made Luo Fan quite happy. For an existence like Luo Fan, the most difficult thing to improve himself was not the method, but to discover his flaws. As long as he discovered his own shortcomings, it would be a matter of time before he wanted to make up for these shortcomings. At this moment, Luo Fan was suddenly stunned as he realized that the Divine Son's memory had suddenly become extremely vivid. This kind of vividness was even not much different from the first 30 years when he had stepped into the path of cultivation. Seeing the changes in his surroundings, Luo Fan's heart moved. He knew the source of this change and thought to himself, "This is clearly a sign that the following memories are extremely profound for him." With this thought in mind, he began to pay attention to all the changes around him. He saw, above the sky, there was suddenly a long rainbow rushing straight. In the blink of an eye, it landed in front of the Divine Son of Ti and showed its figure. It was a middle-aged Taoist. Looking at his aura, he was also at the innate Grand Luo realm. However, if the Divine Son of Ti was equivalent to an existence of a disbanded celestial of the great all-embracing heaven, then he was an existence of a true celestial of the great all-embracing heaven. He was a small realm stronger than the Divine Son of Ti. Fellow Taoist, I am a disciple of the vast human sect. I don't know if you have a sect. If you don't, I am willing to recommend you to join the vast human sect, the middle-aged Taoist said to the Divine Son of Ti very kindly. At this moment, the Divine Son of Ti's previous great perfection and great freedom had completely disappeared. His mind was currently in turmoil, and the qi and blood in his body were even more frantically circulating. 13,008,672 years ago. Did you fight someone on Cloud Coral Island? The Divine Son of Ti asked with great difficulty as he controlled his emotions. Although he was controlling his emotions, his voice was still slightly trembling. How could this middle-aged Taoist remember something that happened more than 13 million years ago so clearly? For a moment, he was stunned. After a long while, he shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, I can't remember." "Why you ask this, fellow Taoist?" "Let's put it that way. 13 million years ago, you really might have fought someone on Cloud Coral Island," the Divine Son of Ti said. "It is indeed possible. I remember that I was pursuing the opportunity to become a Khanate Grand Luo at that time, so I often traveled around and fought with others. However, I can't remember whether I was on Cloud Coral Island or not. After all, it was too long ago," the middle-aged Taoist said. The Divine Son of Ti nodded and said, "If that's the case, then I can rest assured." As he spoke, he pounced on the middle-aged Taoist without holding back. He raised his hand and threw a punch at the middle-aged Taoist's head. The punch was so sudden and fast that if it had been someone at the same level as him, that person's head would definitely have been hit by the punch. However, it was obvious that the middle-aged Taoist was a great, all-embracing heaven true immortal. He was a small realm stronger than the Divine Son of Ti. The gap between their realms could be calculated by thousands of times. With such a gap in realms, the Divine Son of Ti's punch was fast and sudden. However, it did not break through the limits of his reaction. In the nick of time, the middle-aged Taoist's body suddenly flashed with light. It directly condensed into a light screen in front of him, blocking the Divine Son of Ti's punch. A loud rumble rang out, and a powerful shock wave spread in all directions from the point of contact between the two. "It really is you," the Divine Son of Ti roared furiously. At that moment, Luo Fan also remembered that this light was the light that had killed the Divine Son of Ti's master. Although it looked much more powerful than the light at that time, there was no difference in essence. At that moment, Luo Fan also understood why the Divine Son of Ti was so excited and why this memory was so fresh. So he found his enemy. But how did he escape back then? Although he found his enemy, the enemy was thousands of times stronger than him. Taking the initiative to attack was an act of courting death. Luo Fan was quite curious at that moment. The Divine Son of Ti had experienced countless battles and honed himself in the past tens of millions of years. His combat experience had long been unimaginably rich, and the way he used his body had also reached the acme of perfection. Seeing that his fist had been blocked, his body shook, and the chi and blood all over his body surged. In an instant, a red light flashed. The space around his body seemed to be unable to withstand the power of his body, and countless small cracks appeared. Then he directly blasted out thousands of punches, directly hitting the light screen in front of the middle-aged Taoist. All of the power condensed into a single point and exploded in an instant. Cracking sounds rang out in an instant. The light screen was directly blasted apart in an instant, allowing his fist to directly hit the middle-aged Taoist's face. The middle-aged Taoist was sent flying, directly crashing into a mountain hundreds of miles away. The mountain was directly smashed into powder, causing smoke and dust to rise everywhere. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth, kid. If it weren't for the fact that you have some aptitude and don't seem to have a sect, why would I talk to an ant like you? I didn't expect you to dare to be so disrespectful to me. I will definitely crush your bones and scatter your ashes. A cold voice came from the smoke and dust. A ray of light dispersed the smoke and dust, and the middle-aged Taoist walked out of the smoke and dust step by step, looking a little disheveled. Do you know that I've been looking for you for more than 10 million years? Back then, it was fine if you fought with others, because no one could be bothered to care about you. But you shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have killed my master. Today, even if my soul is destroyed, I will definitely let you have a taste of what my master felt like back then. The divine son of Ti's voice was like steel. Stimulated by anger and hatred, the chi and blood around him surged wildly, turning into a red mist that wrapped around his body, making him look like an evil spirit that walked out of hell. After cultivating the Tao of the physical body and becoming an innate grand Luo, his body had long since developed countless magical abilities. His body shook slightly, and his entire body suddenly doubled in size, turning into a small giant that was 6 feet tall and shrouded in golden light. He raised his hand and made a grabbing motion, and the void condensed into a suit of armor that directly covered his body. It made him look like a supreme god of war that specialized in combat. After doing all this, the divine son of Ti's body collapsed the void with a whoosh and directly rushed in front of the middle-aged Taoist. He clenched his hands into fists and used all of his strength to directly punch the middle-aged Taoist's head. This punch contained the will of endless anger. It contained boundless power, directly blasting the space and even distorting time. Under that punch, strange worlds were born one after another and completely destroyed in an instant. The middle-aged Taoist's expression changed slightly, and he raised his hand to guide, causing a long sword to shoot straight at the top of his head. It directly slashed at the divine son of Ti's clenched fists. The speed of this sword was extremely fast, and the divine son of Ti had no intention of blocking it at all, so naturally, they collided in an instant. At that moment, the sound of metal colliding flashed on the divine son of Ti's fist. The long sword actually couldn't cut through his fist, and instead was directly suppressed by the fist, blasting straight at the middle-aged Taoist's head. The middle-aged Taoist did not expect the divine son of Ti's body to be so terrifying. For a moment, he couldn't react in time, and his entire body was blasted deep into the ground, leaving only a deep pit where he was. The divine son of Ti roared. Without hesitation, he followed into the deep pit, raised his fist, and blasted straight at the middle-aged Taoist in the depths of the deep pit. That middle-aged Taoist was extremely aggrieved. His own cultivation realm was a notch higher than that of the divine son of Ti, but because he didn't predict the enemy correctly, he was actually being chased and beaten continuously. Although he didn't suffer much damage, the feeling was extremely uncomfortable. For a moment, he was furious, and the power in his body surged as he shouted, "You've really angered me." As he spoke, a ray of light integrated into the longsword, causing the aura of the longsword to skyrocket by 100 times. It directly shattered the void, and suddenly slashed at the divine son of Ti. The divine son of Ti roared, and the blood in his body surged again as he directly grabbed the longsword with his left hand. Although the longsword was fast, the divine son of Ti was already prepared, so he instantly grabbed the longsword. The longsword itself was the middle-aged Taoist method of mincing the divine son of Ti, so it was naturally not that easy to grab. In an instant, the longsword shook, and the divine son of Ti's entire left palm, and even his entire arm, was instantly minced. The divine son of Ti did not care about this at all, and his expression did not change at all. Taking advantage of the process of his arm being minced, he barely twisted the longsword and slightly moved out of the way. His right hand was no longer obstructed, and he once again blasted out a punch, directly hitting the middle-aged Taoist's head. "It's useless!" The middle-aged Taoist roared, and with a twist of his body, the power in his body surged. His body shone brightly, and he finally managed to barely stabilize his body, preventing himself from being sent flying again. Good move. Luo Fan watched the entire process of the battle from the perspective of the divine son of Ti, and for a moment, he was secretly amazed. Of course, what he was amazed about was not the middle-aged Taoist's method. As an existence that was a level stronger than his opponent, the middle-aged Taoist response was actually only average. If Luo Fan was here and used the same method, he would be 100 times better than the middle-aged Taoist. At the very least, he would not have been in such a sorry state. What he was amazed about was, of course, the divine son of Ti. Although the divine son of Ti used different methods for the 3 punches just now, and the price he paid was also extremely high, the result was rather shocking in the end. At that moment, the middle-aged Taoist's entire body suddenly made cracking sounds. Then, he let out a scream, and endless blood suddenly gushed out of the acupoints all over his body, making him look like a hedgehog with red thorns. The 3 punches hit the same spot, and the real power of the first 2 punches was hidden in the opponent's body. It's only until the 3rd punch that it explodes at the same time, producing a destructive power that is 100 times stronger than normal. Moreover, during the process, the opponent who is a level higher than him was unable to detect it and even underestimated him. Such a battle talent is really amazing. Luo Fan could not help but exclaim. At that moment, the divine son of Ti had already displayed his brilliance. From this, one could already see the elegance of setting foot on the 9th step in the future. Chapter 1089. The middle-aged Taoist cultivated the way of the golden elixir. After reaching the primordial great Luo, the body was the golden elixir, and the golden elixir was the body. His whole body was flawless, and his spirit had become extremely tough and solid, no different from a real person. At this moment, the human-shaped shadow that the divine son had directly grabbed from the middle-aged Taoist's head was obviously the middle-aged Taoist spirit. The middle-aged Taoist was extremely shocked. After cultivating to the primordial realm of the great all-embracing heaven, although he knew that there were countless powerful beings who could defeat him, he had never thought that a small being, who was only equivalent to a disbanded celestial of the great all-embracing heaven, would actually be able to destroy his body and directly take out his spirit without any ability to resist. This was simply a fact that subverted his worldview. For a moment, he didn't know how to react. The divine son didn't care about anything else. His mind was completely drowned in anger and hatred. All kinds of mysterious instincts that he had cultivated for more than 10 million years emerged, and then produced some inexplicable sublimation. At this moment, he didn't even need to think. The qi blood, gang qi, and strength in his body all naturally combined to achieve the effect he needed. He directly locked the spirit of the middle-aged Taoist in the palm of his hand. After locking the spirit, the divine son lifted his foot and stepped down on the middle-aged Taoist body below. The middle-aged Taoist spirit had already left his body. No matter how strong his body was, without any defense, what could it do? Although the body raised its hand to block instinctively, in the end, the divine son still easily passed through the defense and stepped directly on the middle-aged Taoist's head. The power passed down, causing the middle-aged Taoist's whole body to explode with a loud bang. The middle-aged Taoist's power was extremely terrifying. When his body exploded, the power naturally spread in all directions without any concealment. One could imagine the explosive force and the strength of the impact. The whole ground shook violently. In the midst of this shaking, the surrounding ground was directly lifted up, and the body of the divine son was also sent flying under the impact of this explosion. Not only did it rush out of the ground, but it also directly rushed hundreds of miles into the sky. His whole body was dripping with blood and covered with wounds, and he looked extremely miserable. And below, when everything calmed down, there was already a gigantic crater. The crater had a radius of several hundred kilometers and a depth of tens of thousands of meters. Most of the mountains in the surroundings had collapsed. More than 70% to 80% of the living beings in the mountain range were wiped out by the explosion. Luo Fan used the son of Ti's perspective to observe the situation below. He was even more impressed by the son of Ti. If the middle-aged Daoist power had erupted uncontrollably and caused such a result, if he were to truly unleash his power and his Dao, the destructive power he could produce would be astonishing. One could only imagine how terrifying it would be under such circumstances. The god's son, who was a level lower than him, had defeated him so easily and even controlled his god soul. How could he not be amazed? The divine prince of body didn't care about what was happening below. To him, revenge was the most important thing. Apart from that, even if the world was destroyed and the world returned to primal chaos, he would not hesitate. He wouldn't care about it at all, not to mention that it was just a crater. Let me see who you fought with back then. Don't worry, I won't let you leave alone. I will definitely send that person to meet you. The son of Ti looked at the middle-aged Taoist soul with extreme hatred. Then, without waiting for the middle-aged Taoist to speak, he punched the head of the middle-aged Taoist soul. With this punch, his ferocious will flowed through his fist and directly into the middle-aged Taoist soul. In an instant, all the memories of the middle-aged Taoist were like a fast-paced movie. At the same time, the son of Ti's will kept flowing through Luo Fan's mind. To the middle-aged Taoist priest, this kind of rough reading was a form of extreme torture. It completely destroyed his endurance, making it impossible for him to keep calm. He began to howl crazily. The pain and mournfulness in the howl would make anyone's hair stand on end. However, the son of Ti felt relaxed and happy. He felt the hatred and depression that had accumulated for tens of millions of years gradually dissipate, and a feeling of clarity arose spontaneously. The middle-aged Taoist's memories changed extremely quickly, making it difficult for Luo Fan to clearly remember everything in the memories. He only knew the general situation of the middle-aged Taoist. This situation had clearly happened because the son of Ti had not cared about the middle-aged Taoist situation at all. He did not care about his memories at all. Since he did not remember, Luo Fan naturally could not find anything in his memories. Found it. After searching for a long time, the son of Ti was suddenly delighted. However, his mood soon became gloomy. It turned out that after searching for half a day, he had already found the memories of the middle-aged Taoist more than 10 million years ago. He found the memories of the battle that killed his master. From these memories, he once again saw the moment when his master died. This was the first time he saw the scene from a different perspective. For a moment, extremely complicated emotions surged in his heart. There was a nostalgia for seeing his master again, as well as an indescribable pain and a regret of not being able to take care of his master, even though he wanted to. After carefully observing his master from the memories for a long time, the son of Ti finally shifted his attention to the cultivator who was fighting the middle-aged Taoist. It was a woman. She was extremely beautiful. Even the son of Ti's heart trembled at the sight of her. He could not help but feel a natural desire to get close to her. This woman was also at the peak of primordial unity, pure yang at that time. She was also pursuing the opportunity to become a Khanate Grand Luo. The technique that this woman used was extremely mysterious. It seemed like she was using some kind of fragrance to fight. As she raised her hand, various scents floated around, blocking the middle-aged Taoist's attack. Back then, the aftermath of the attack that killed the son of Ti's master was caused by this woman being unable to block the middle-aged Taoist attack, causing the shockingly destructive light to scatter in all directions. The woman instantly noticed the presence of the son of Ti and his master. Her expression changed drastically, as if she could not bear to watch them. In the midst of the chaos, she raised her hand and gently wrapped a fragrance around the son of Ti, who had already gone mad. Then, she sent him tens of thousands of miles away. She disappeared from the battlefield's area of influence. After that, because she was distracted for a moment, she wasn't able to resist the middle-aged Taoist attack in the end, and she was heavily injured. In the end, she dragged her damaged body and fled far away, leaving the fortuitous encounter to the middle-aged Taoist. So that's how it is. The son of Ti's expression was already blank. He could not believe what he was seeing. She was the one who saved me back then. Should I seek revenge on her? What should I do? The son of Ti was extremely conflicted. His eyes were filled with the light of struggle. It was the aftermath of the battle between this woman and the middle-aged Taoist that killed his master, causing him to lose the person closest to him. However, it was also this woman. In the midst of the intense battle, she sent him away so that he could escape and ascend to the heavens, so that he could avoid the fate of dying in the aftermath of the battle like his master. This was a situation where there was hatred and kindness at the same time, making it difficult for him to determine what he should do. While he was struggling, the middle-aged Taoist gradually came back to his senses. The torture that the son of Ti had inflicted on him previously was enough to make him hover between life and death. It made him suffer unimaginable pain. Even now, his spirit was still a little dazed, showing faint signs of dissipating. However, it did not dissipate after all. After all, he was not dead yet. As the son of Ti fell into a state of conflict, he forced himself to gather his will and gather his spirit that was about to dissipate. At that moment, the middle-aged Taoist knew that he was at the brink of death. Not daring to be careless, he turned around and turned into a round pill. With a sudden flash, he shattered the space and dived into it. He was relying on such a method to escape from the demonic clutches of the divine son of Ti. After all, no matter how strong he was originally and how much higher his cultivation realm was than the son of Ti's, what he had left was only a spirit at that moment. Although this spirit was intrinsically powerful, it did not have much power at all. Although his cultivation realm was profound, he did not possess much power at all, and he did not have a physical body to protect himself. Under such circumstances, not to mention a Khanate Grand Luo cultivator, even a primordial unity pure yang cultivator could easily refine and crush him. How would he dare to attack the divine son under such circumstances? Since he could come back to his senses, the only choice he had was to escape. His escape startled the son of Ti out of his conflicted state of mind. A hint of disdain flashed in his eyes. He took a step in the void, and his body trembled. He directly passed through the void and arrived in front of the spirit. He raised his hand and made a grabbing motion. His hand drew a complicated and mysterious trajectory, directly grabbing the spirit and holding it in his hand once again. If I'm still a little hesitant when it comes to the lotus leaf female cultivator, there's nothing for me to hesitate about when it comes to you, the son of Ti said coldly. The chi and blood in his body surged and instantly rushed into the middle-aged Taoist spirit. It directly detonated inside, causing the middle-aged Taoist spirit to completely collapse and turn into nothingness. Only an extremely shrill scream was left in the void. No matter what I do with this female cultivator called Lotus Leaf Fairy, I'll have to find her before I decide. The son of Ti had already broken free from the conflict and finally made a decision. As soon as he made up his mind, Luo Fan suddenly felt the light around the son of Ti's body become blurry again. This is because he's already gotten his revenge. Everything that happens next no longer has any special meaning to him, so he doesn't have a deep impression of it. Luo Fan looked around and already knew the reason. However, how are you going to treat that Lotus Leaf Fairy? I'm looking forward to it. Luo Fan was quite interested in the Divine Sun's choice. Although the realm above the innate zenith heaven was still a very weak realm for Luo Fan, who was in the Tao Master realm, it was more useful to him than before. Especially this cultivation technique of the Tao of the body that was completely different from anything he'd seen in the past. It gave him even more inspiration when he attained the first heaven realm. As a result, although his surroundings had returned to the blurry and illusory state, it was more beneficial for Luo Fan. It allowed him to focus more on the various changes in the demigod's body. This banded celestial of the great all-embracing heaven, true celestial of the great all-embracing heaven, golden celestial of the great all-embracing heaven, when the surrounding light and shadow stabilized and became real again, the divine child of the body had directly crossed the three realms and reached the peak of the great Luo golden immortal realm. She was only one step away from breaking through the immortal foundation and becoming a quasi-saint. And but at the same time, more than 30 million years had passed. The whole cultivation process was extremely smooth, which made Luo Fan feel that his cultivation realm had been greatly loosened, and there were faint signs of becoming a minor completion of the Tao Master realm. The Tao Master realm was the same as the previous Transcendent realm, Tao Integration realm, Void Enlightenment realm, and Perishment realm. It was also divided into 4 smaller realms, namely Entry, Minor Completion, Profound Completion, and Completion. When he had just become a Tao Master, he had always been in the Entry realm of Tao Master. If he had cultivated normally, if he wanted to break through the Entry realm and become a minor completion of the Tao Master realm, he would need at least 1,000,000 years. If he was unlucky and got stuck somewhere, he might even need tens of millions of years to achieve it. At this moment, only a few decades had passed, but he could already have such a strong feeling of breaking through. However, this was an extremely rare occurrence. Just the breakthrough of the 3 realms of innate and zenith heaven could bring him such inspiration. Luo Fan was even more looking forward to the understanding and experience of the Divine Son of Body. Lotus Leaf Fairy. At this moment, the Divine Son of Body was looking at a woman who was bending over to water the flowers not far away, with a very complicated look in his eyes, as he murmured. They were on an island that was suspended in the air. The area of the island was not considered vast, only a few 100,000 feet in circumference. There were mountains, lakes, and herb gardens. With a thatched cottage, it was like a paradise. Only the Lotus Leaf Fairy was present on the entire island. Behind her was a cottage that was neither too big nor too small. The Lotus Leaf Fairy's cultivation realm was also at the peak of innate zenith heaven, which was not much different from the Divine Son of Body. However, the Tao she cultivated was obviously not a profound one. Just by sensing her aura, Luo Fan knew that. She was not as good as the Divine Son of Body. If the Divine Son of Body wanted to defeat her, he would only need a few moves to do so. I am Lotus Leaf. How should I address you, fellow Taoist? The Lotus Leaf Fairy looked up and saw the Divine Son of Body. She was slightly shocked, and then said in an extremely pleasant voice, "My name is not important. I just want to ask you, do you remember what happened 46,007,573 years ago? Did you fight with someone for the opportunity to become an innate zenith heaven?" asked the Divine Son of Body. The Lotus Leaf Fairy thought for a while, shook her head, and said rather embarrassedly, "I don't remember what happened 40 million years ago." As expected, you don't remember. The Divine Son of Body sighed. Such an answer. He had already expected it. After all, apart from people like him who suffered from the devastating effects of the battle back then, who would still remember the battle that happened 40 million years ago? The Lotus Leaf Fairy's answer was considered normal. If she had directly said that she remembered and talked about the battle back then, the Divine Son of Body would have suspected that she had investigated him and was lying to him on purpose. "Since you don't remember, I'll tell you." As he said that, he raised his hand and pointed. The Gang Chi in his body directly condensed into a light shadow in the void. The light shadow was divided into 2 parts. One was the scene of the battle in his own memory, and the other was the scene of the battle that he found from the middle-aged Taoist memory. The two light shadows were revealed at the same time, so anyone could tell what was going on at a glance. The Lotus Leaf Fairy also saw what the Divine Son of Body wanted to express, and her expression changed slightly. After a while, the Lotus Leaf Fairy sighed and said, "I'm very sorry." The Lotus Leaf Fairy sighed and said, "The person who died was my master. I met Master when I was 3 years old, and after that, I cultivated to the peak of the mortal realm in 30 years. That time, it was Master who took me to look for the opportunity to become an immortal. The Lotus Leaf Fairy opened her mouth, but in the end, she still couldn't say anything. What could she say? There was nothing much to say in this matter. For the Divine Son of Body, this was a misfortune that overturned fate, but for the Lotus Leaf Fairy, this was not what she wanted at all. She could also be said to be a victim. Ever since I was young, Master and I depended on each other. In my heart, Master wasn't just a simple master. He also made up for my desire for a father. To me, he was my father, the person closest to me in my life. Back then, when he was torn apart in front of me and turned into nothingness, I felt like the whole sky had collapsed. From then on, the immortality that I originally yearned for became meaningless. The Divine Son of Body slowly walked behind the Lotus Leaf Fairy and sat down next to the wooden table in front of the cottage. From then on, there was only one reason that supported my cultivation. That was to find you and avenge my master. The Divine Son of Body seemed to be talking to himself. This made the Lotus Leaf Fairy's expression change drastically. Chapter 1090. The Lotus Leaf Fairy opened her mouth, but couldn't say anything in the end. Tell me, how should I treat you? Should I thank you for saving my life, or should I kill you to avenge my master? The Divine Son of Tea said to the Lotus Leaf Fairy in the end. I don't know either. The Lotus Leaf Fairy didn't defend herself, but sighed. You don't know. The Divine Son of Tea looked a little confused. He sat there in a daze, and no one knew what he was thinking. After a while, the Divine Son of Tea sighed and said, some things have to be solved. Since we don't know how to solve it, we'll leave it to fate. After a while, the Divine Son of Divine Body sighed. With that, he raised his hand and waved, and a strange stone door suddenly appeared out of thin air from inside his body. This stone door was only the size of a palm, and looked very ordinary, like a work of art carved out of ordinary stones by mortals. However, after this stone door appeared, it expanded in the wind and instantly grew to a height of 10 meters. It also emitted a very strange aura. This aura was neutral and peaceful, yet faintly contained an extremely terrifying aura of destruction that was concealed extremely deeply. This is a demon, Luo Fan, who was like the incarnation of the Divine Son of Tea, was suddenly shocked, and an indescribable shock appeared in his mind. He didn't have any impression of this stone door. He didn't know whether it was because the memory of obtaining this stone door wasn't important to the Divine Son of Tea and didn't leave too much of a mark in his heart, or because this stone door had a special power that could block his senses, making him completely ignore the process of obtaining this stone door. But no matter what the reason was, it couldn't change the fact that this was the first time Luo Fan learned of the existence of this stone door. Why does the Divine Son of Tea have such a stone door? What does this have to do with the realm of demons? Countless thoughts flashed through Luo Fan's mind. Suddenly, he became a little excited about what the Divine Son of Tea was going to do next. This is a gateway to another world. It said that that world is extremely dangerous, and those who aren't safe to be will almost certainly die if they step into it. I don't know what to do with you now, and you can't come up with any constructive suggestions. So, let's leave it to fate. The two of us will pass through this stone door and enter that world together, and let God decide whether you or I will die. Or would they escape together and ascend to the heavens? No matter what the result is, the moment you and I step through that door, all the grievances between us will be written off, the Divine Son of Body said. The Lotus Leaf Fairy frowned slightly, and there was an intense struggle in her eyes. He was living a good life here, but suddenly, a person who had a grudge against him came to his door and said that he wanted to settle the grudge. Entering a world where there was almost no chance of survival was a huge shock to anyone. It was not an easy decision to make. Even if this fairy lotus leaf had always been rather sensible, it was impossible for her to decide her own fate so decisively. After a while, Fairy Lotus Leaf finally knew that the decision was not in her hands. He knew that even if he objected, he would not be able to stop the person before him. He sighed helplessly and said, "Fine, let's use this method to settle the grudge between us." A wry smile appeared on the divine prince's face. How he hoped that Fairy Lotus Leaf would object, if she did. He would then be able to find a reason to make a move. In that case, he wouldn't have to be so conflicted. With a slight sigh, the earth chi in his body trembled slightly and turned into a long river that poured directly into the stone door. His earth chi was vast and powerful. No matter how much it flowed out, there was no sign of it being consumed. As the earth chi continued to pour in, the aura that came out of the stone door became more and more intense. It became more and more obvious. This process lasted for more than half a day before it stopped. The moment it stopped, the entire stone door had completely changed its appearance. In the instant that it stopped, the entire stone gate had changed completely. It stood there, emanating an aura that shook the heavens and the earth, causing the entire void to tremble. The entire floating island was trembling with a strong aura. This aura even formed an obvious domain around the stone door, causing the surrounding light to distort slightly, faintly revealing all kinds of inexplicable light and shadows. After doing all this, the divine son of body looked slightly pale, although the consumption of the earth chi in his body was nothing to him. However, during this process, he was constantly enduring some sort of strange pressure emitted by the stone door. This kind of pressure acted on his mind, and the further it went, the more intense it became, making him feel as if he was being oppressed by millions of worlds. It was precisely because of this that although he looked unharmed on the surface, he had actually consumed a lot of his mind. At this moment, he felt extremely tired and uncomfortable. With a pale face, he raised his hand and gently pushed the stone door. The stone door opened to both sides, revealing a hazy world that seemed to be covered by fog. At the same time, the strange aura skyrocketed by who knew how many times. In an instant, it caused the surrounding time and space to change, as if it was covered by fog that gushed out from it, causing the surrounding visibility to decrease by many times. Even the divine son of body could only see within a few dozen feet of the surrounding area. This is the demon realm. Luo Fan looked at the world behind the stone door, feeling quite curious. This is it. Please. After the divine son of body pushed open the stone door, a faint look of fear and determination flashed in his eyes. It was obvious that the world in front of him was also extremely pressuring, making him extremely fearful and uneasy. The Lotus Leaf Fairy's expression was quite gloomy at the moment. She sighed and said, "I didn't expect that a mistake tens of millions of years ago would actually lead to such an outcome. The mysteries of the world are truly fearsome and terrifying." As she spoke, she took a light step forward and crashed into the stone door without hesitation. She was directly swallowed by the fog inside and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Watching the Lotus Leaf Fairy disappear into the stone door, the divine son of body's eyes became a little dazed. "Master, are you satisfied with such a decision? Did I ignore your hatred or ignore the kindness I received?" The divine son of body murmured. The gang chi in his body surged endlessly, and his cultivation realm, which had been stagnant for a long time, seemed to have increased again. It was obvious that he had finally put an end to the hatred that had been suppressed at the bottom of his heart. His mind became clear, and his cultivation realm also loosened. Luo Fan sensed the changes in the divine son of body's body and knew that he was brewing a huge explosion and was heading towards an astonishing breakthrough. That breakthrough would change the divine son of body's world, and it would definitely give him a shocking revelation. For a moment, he was looking forward to it. After murmuring to himself, the divine son of body shook his head and stepped into the stone door. At this moment, Luo Fan stimulated all of his senses and tried hard to sense any changes in his surroundings. He wanted to find a way to pass through the stone door. He wanted to see if the world behind the stone door was really the demon realm and what kind of appearance this world had. Unfortunately, at this moment, the surrounding light and shadows suddenly completely calmed down. All of his senses of the outside world had completely disappeared, leaving only his perception of the various changes inside the divine son of Body's body. How could this be? Luo Fan was shocked. Such a change was unprecedented. This was a world that had evolved from the divine son of Body's understanding and experience. Everything that had happened here was all in the divine son of Body's memory. If the divine son of Body's memory didn't leave a deep impression, then it would naturally be like what Luo Fan had seen before. The light and shadows were constantly changing, and many years had passed in a trance. If the divine son of Body had forgotten and didn't leave a trace in his memory, then it would naturally be completely skipped. But no matter what, it was impossible for such a scene to happen. The feeling in front of him was clearly that he was completely locked in the divine son of Body's body. He couldn't sense anything that the divine son of Body had experienced at all. He couldn't even read the divine son of Body's feelings at all. How could this happen normally? How could this happen? Luo Fan couldn't figure out what the problem was at all. He tried hard to sense his surroundings, but no matter how hard he tried, his surroundings were pitch black, calm, and empty. And the divine son of Body's body was undergoing all kinds of strange changes, reminding him of what the divine son of Body was experiencing during this process. This kind of inexplicable feeling really confused him. It seems that this is indeed the demon world. Based on the current situation, either the divine son of Body sealed this memory later on, or the demon world has a special power that can make people who aren't here with their own eyes see it. Even if I peek through my memory, I can't see the demon world clearly. After a long time, Luo Fan finally sighed to himself and found some explanations for what was happening in front of him. No matter how he explained it, Luo Fan couldn't see what was happening in the outside world at this moment. It was a fact that he couldn't find out what was going on in the demon world. Therefore, what Luo Fan could do was carefully sense the changes in the divine son of Body's body, try hard to understand the divine son of Body's cultivation, and understand some of the enlightenment that the divine son of Body could bring him. After losing all kinds of images from the outside world, Luo Fan was able to deeply immerse himself in the understanding of the divine son of Body's body. This kind of understanding allowed him to have a deeper understanding of the way of the body that the divine son of Body cultivated, and he discovered many things that he had overlooked in the past. He vaguely felt that he had some new gains, and the loosening of his cultivation realm seemed to become more obvious with this change. Time passed slowly, and no one knew how much time had passed during this process. Of course, this was only the time that the divine son of Body had experienced. After all, this was the experience in the divine son of Body's memory. For Luo Fan, as long as he wanted to, he could go through even billions of years with a single thought. Therefore, although it was unknown whether millions or tens of millions of years had passed, Luo Fan didn't feel like he had been imprisoned for that long. To him, it felt like only a few days or even a few hours had passed. At a certain moment, Luo Fan felt his eyes light up, and then the surrounding peace, darkness, and emptiness were completely broken. As the light and shadow changed, he discovered that the divine son of Body had already appeared in a brand new world. Behind him, a stone door floated. It was similar to the stone door that the divine son of Body had taken out back then, but the aura it emitted was completely different. It was more like the aura of the Earth's universe. There was a boundless sea of clouds around the divine son of T. Behind this stone door was a world that seemed to be wrapped in fog, similar to the stone door that the divine son of Body had taken out back then. As soon as Luo Fan saw this, he knew that the divine son of Body had probably left the world that was suspected to be the demon realm and returned to the Earth's universe. At this moment, it should be the moment when he had just stepped into the Earth's universe. After coming back to his senses, he also knew how long it had been since he was completely unable to sense the outside world. More than 3 million years. So he stayed in that world for more than 3 million years. Luo Fan thought to himself, finally back. Lotus Leaf, you can come out now. The divine son of body looked around. There was a look of nostalgia and joy in his eyes as he murmured. As he said this, a shadow rushed out of his body and condensed out of thin air into a woman with a big belly. The woman's appearance was exactly like the Lotus Leaf Fairy from back then. Lang Jun, are we back? After the figure of the Lotus Leaf Fairy appeared, she looked around. There was a look of extreme surprise in her eyes as she spoke with suppressed excitement. That's right, we're back. We finally don't have to let our child be born in that world. The divine son of body looked at the Lotus Leaf Fairy gently and said, That's great. The Lotus Leaf Fairy cried tears of joy. What the hell is going on? They used to be entangled with each other endlessly. Why does it look like they're not only married, but even have a child now? Luo Fan was a little confused at this time. Madam, I feel that I can no longer suppress my realm. Now I need to find a place to break through. Let's leave this place quickly. The divine son of body looked around and said to the Lotus Leaf Fairy, Well, husband's breakthrough is the most important thing. Fortunately, we successfully returned before breaking through. Otherwise, if we broke through in that world, we would never be able to return in the future. If that was the case, our child, the Lotus Leaf Fairy touched her belly. She said with lingering fear. As the two of them spoke, the divine son of body waved the stone door. The stone door instantly shrank into a small stone statue and fell into his hand. Then he raised his hand and shook it. The stone door that was like a stone statue disappeared without a trace. After doing this, he pulled the Lotus Leaf Fairy. The two of them turned into a long rainbow and directly shot out, disappearing from this place. They flew a distance of trillions of miles and came to a place where there were not too many powerful creatures around. They pressed down on the escape light and landed on a mountain. After landing, there was no time to do anything else. The divine son of body sat down cross-legged and began to circulate the Gang Qi in his body. He released the originally suppressed realm and began a huge breakthrough. His cultivation realm naturally leaped from the innate grand heavenly realm to the early stage of quasi-saint realm. At this moment, his body suddenly dispersed. Every single cell, every single particle was twisting wildly. Boundless vital energy and blood soared into the sky during this process, directly enveloping the entire mountain peak. It even wanted to spread out to the mountain range outside the mountain peak. The cells and particles that came out of his body grew crazily and changed crazily. Every cell and every particle gave birth to indescribable vitality or activity. They began to twist and change respectively. In the end, they actually turned into countless pocket-sized divine sons of body. After these cells and particles transformed, the divine sons of body were very weak when they first appeared. They were just like ordinary mortals. However, after they appeared, they did not even need to absorb energy from the outside world. They began to grow naturally like living creatures, strengthening crazily. From a mortal to a cultivator, all the way to an immortal. In the end, each of them grew to the peak of the innate grand Luo realm before stopping. When each tiny, pocket-sized divine son of body grew to the innate grand Luo realm, all the divine sons of body gathered together and finally became one, becoming the original divine son of body. At this time, the power of all the pocket-sized divine sons of body had completely fused together and produced an essential sublimation. They combined with the original power of the divine son of body and finally pushed it to a whole new realm, the quasi-sage realm. I see. Luo Fan carefully grasped the entire process of the breakthrough of the divine son of body. At this moment, such a thought flashed through his mind. This was only the process of breaking through from the innate grand Luo realm to the quasi-sage realm. Compared to the existence of the Tao Master realm like Luo Fan, the level was many times lower. However, the mysteries of the physical body revealed in the whole process of breaking through was something that Luo Fan had not grasped. This profundity allowed his understanding of the world, as well as his explanation and description of the physical body, to undergo a richer transformation. Such rich changes were reflected in his cultivation. It added some more subtle changes to the Tao fruit great way that he created based on the worldview of laws. Such changes finally became the straw that broke the camel's back. Finally, his cultivation realm broke through the initial Tao master realm and made him become a minor Tao master in an instant. With the breakthrough of his realm, the strength of his body, his strength, his divine soul, his perception, his willpower, everything about him instantly obtained essential growth. He was already dozens of times stronger than before. Moreover, in the process of growth, his physical body had undergone a completely different change compared to the previous breakthroughs. Although the growth in strength was about the same, his control was more superb. He already faintly felt that he was relying on nothingness and eternally immortal. Chapter 1091. However, for Luo Fan, spending time to comprehend the divine son of Ti's understanding and experience was already worth it. While Luo Fan was breaking through, the divine son of Ti had also completed the entire process of breaking through. His entire body exuded a clear and bright feeling, a feeling that far surpassed that of a connate zenith heaven realm being emitted from his body. Lang Jun, you finally completed your breakthrough. Are you confident that you can get rid of the infection that our child has suffered now? Lotus Leaf Fairy asked anxiously when she saw that the divine son of Ti had completed his breakthrough. The divine son of Ti sensed for a moment and sighed. I'm only 60% confident. There's still quite a bit of danger if we really want our child to completely escape the influence of that world. Then what should we do? If we can't get rid of the infection from that world, once my child is born, he will naturally be drawn into that world and will never be able to see us again. The Lotus Leaf Fairy couldn't help but say, with a gloomy expression, "Don't worry, madam. Although I'm only 60% confident that I can completely get rid of the infection, I'm already absolutely confident that I can seal it. As long as we seal the child now, we can come back to get rid of the infection when our cultivation realms improve in the future." The divine son of Ti comforted her. "That's the only thing we can do for now," the Lotus Leaf Fairy said faintly as she lovingly stroked her belly. For a mother, sealing her child, even if it was in her belly, would definitely feel extremely painful and helpless. However, even if there was a slight chance of avoiding it, she definitely wouldn't choose to do so. Unfortunately, compared to the 40% chance of failure, she would rather bear this kind of pain herself. The divine son of Ti sighed. After comforting the Lotus Leaf Fairy for a while, he let her lie down in midair and formed a strange shape with his hands. It was like a strange and mysterious hand seal. The stellar energy around his body, which had undergone a qualitative change, began to surge. It poured into the hand seal formed by his hands in a very special way, causing his hands to emit a mysterious aura, as if it could completely seal everything. Following that, the divine son of Physique pushed his hands towards Fairy Lotus Leaf's belly and was about to come into contact with it. At this moment, a leisurely sigh rang out in the ears of the divine son and the Lotus Leaf Fairy. "If you go down like this, you'll die. I'm afraid your son will never be able to leave the devil realm." The voice was clear and calm. The divine son of Body was shocked. Regardless of whether this was true or not, he couldn't risk his own son. Unfortunately, at this moment, his power was completely boiling. Even if he wanted to stop it, he could no longer stop his own seal. At this critical moment, he used all his strength to turn his hands and finally managed to shift the position of contact from the Lotus Leaf Fairy's stomach to an empty space. With a soft puff, the seal in his hands exploded. It acted directly on the void. With the appearance of this seal, the space-time within a radius of 300 meters was instantly compressed into a small crystal. Because the space-time was compressed too quickly, the surrounding space-time couldn't react at all, causing a void to appear where the compressed space-time originally was. The surrounding space-time began to crazily crush this void. In a short while, it had already produced layers of space-time fluctuations, forming spatial ripples. Seeing this, the divine son of Body heaved a sigh of relief. He grabbed Fairy Lotus Leaf with one hand and protected her behind him. He raised his head and looked around, looking for the person who had just spoken. At this moment, the space in front of the divine son of body began to gradually distort. A figure gradually materialized from the void and gradually appeared. The process of this person's appearance was extremely mysterious. Even though the divine son of body had just become a quasi-saint, he couldn't completely understand the mystery of the process of this person's appearance. He couldn't figure out how this person appeared. It was obvious that this method alone, this person was much stronger than the divine son of body. Luo Fan was attached to the divine son of body. At this moment, he was using the divine son of body's perspective to observe and sense everything. When he saw this person, he vaguely felt a sense of familiarity. This familiar feeling wasn't because he had sensed this aura before. It was because this aura contained a certain characteristic. It was a characteristic of incomparable self-confidence and incomparable harmony. It seems like the divine son of battle and the others have this feeling. This kind of self-confidence is because of the sage standing behind him. He has the confidence of having a backer that no one can shake. On the other hand, perfect harmony is a special characteristic that has been sublimated to the extreme in the path of cultivation, reaching the peak and end of a certain path. With a slight thought, Luo Fan knew the origin of this special characteristic. After understanding this, how could Luo Fan not understand? This person was clearly a disciple of the sage. Looks like it's time for the divine son of body to become a disciple of the ancestor of Hongmeng. This person should be a disciple of the ancestor of Hongmeng, Luo Fan thought. How should I address you? Is there any basis for what you said just now? Although the divine son of body was shocked by the strength of this cultivator, who was suspected to be a disciple of the sage, he still asked with great spirit. The person looked at the divine son of body and smiled. I am a disciple of the ancestor of Hongmeng. My name is Wanli. What I said just now is naturally based on what I said. I think you used a sealing technique. The divine son of body nodded. On the surface, this seal does seem to be able to slow down the invasion of the demon world's power, allowing your son to maintain his current state and prevent the invasion from deepening. However, the truth is that it allows your son's body and mind to become more deeply integrated with that power. This kind of fusion is irreversible. Once you seal it, even if it's only for an instant, the fusion will never stop. In the end, even if you have enough cultivation, it will be difficult to get rid of it, Wanli said with a faint smile. Wanli looked like a young man with a peaceful face and deep eyes. He naturally had a quality that made people believe him. When the divine son heard Wanli's words, he instinctively wanted to refute him. However, as he thought about it, he broke out in a cold sweat. That was because he discovered that what Wanli said was very likely to happen. The power of that world had the ability to infect all living beings that stepped into it. If one had enough strength and could consciously resist this kind of infection, one could barely resist it, just like the body divine son and the lotus leaf fairy. But if it was a baby, because it had no self-awareness, it would be impossible for it to resist this kind of infection. Under such circumstances, if a seal was used to seal the power, then the power would not be able to increase the scope of its infection and would naturally dig deeper. In other words, if this power was sealed, it would be destroyed. This power was unable to completely infect his son, so it would instead deepen the level of infection, changing the direction of his body and mind. Thinking about all of this, the divine son of body couldn't help but feel extremely afraid. He hurriedly bowed to Wanli and thanked him repeatedly. Wanli smiled faintly. With a wave of his hand, he helped the divine son of Ti up and said, "There's no need to thank me. I came here especially for you this time. How can I watch you make a mistake? Fellow Taoist is a disciple of a sage. May I know why you're looking for me? If I can help, I won't hesitate to do so," the divine son of Ti said hurriedly. At this time, the lotus leaf fairy still hadn't recovered from the shock. It was obvious that she was still terrified that her son had almost disappeared from their world forever. Haha, this matter is simple. There's no need for you to do anything. My master deduced that there's some fate between us, so he sent me here to give this to you, Juan Lizzie said with a laugh. As he spoke, he raised his hand and waved it. A piece of jade appeared in his hand. This piece of jade was as thin as a piece of paper. It was 2 fingers wide and 1 finger long. It was made of a kind of jade that Luo Fan had never seen before. There was a warm glow on it. Although it didn't show any special cultivation characteristics, one could tell at a glance that it was something extraordinary. Supreme Sage. The divine son of Ti's mind was in turmoil. In this world, throughout the endless years, only the 7 great sages stood at the highest peak, overlooking the flow of all things in the world. In the eyes of all the cultivators in the universe on Earth, the sages were supreme existences. Under such a concept, a sage suddenly said that they were fated and personally sent someone to give him something. For the divine son of Ti, the impact and feeling of being flattered could be imagined. For a moment, the divine son of Ti's body trembled slightly. The lotus leaf fairy behind him had her eyes shining, showing her anticipation and excitement. That's right. Hurry up and take it. Seeing the divine son of Ti's excited look, Juan Lizzie chuckled and handed the jade piece to the divine son of Ti. The divine son of Ti hurriedly took the jade piece. As soon as it touched his hand, it was extremely warm. At the same time, it made him feel extremely comfortable, but he couldn't tell why. What kind of treasure is this? The divine son of Ti touched the jade piece, feeling very hesitant. This jade piece was obviously not ordinary, but he couldn't feel what mysteries it contained. It almost felt like it was a piece of art. All right, since this item has been delivered, I won't stay to disturb the 2 of you anymore. I'll take my leave now. Juan Lizzie watched the divine son of Ti take the jade piece and smiled. His words woke the divine son of Ti from his confused state. At this moment, the divine son of Ti knew that this was not the time to be in a daze looking for the mysteries of the jade piece. He hurriedly put the jade piece into his body and said to Juan Lizzie, "Fellow Taoist, please wait." Juan Lizzie stopped and asked, "Is there anything else, fellow Taoist?" The divine son of Ti bowed and said, "It's about my son. I'm not strong enough, and I don't have absolute confidence in dealing with my son's situation. I hope fellow Taoist won't give up and help me." "I can't thank you enough," the divine prince bowed again and said. The lotus leaf fairy also bowed and asked Juan Lizzie for help. Juan Lizzie smiled and said, "This is not difficult. It's a small matter for me to get rid of the power of the demon realm. However, I see that fellow Taoist has the strength to get rid of it. Why don't you try it yourself?" The divine son of Ti said shamefully, "Well, although I have some strength, I'm only 60% sure that I can get rid of the power that's infecting my son. The chances of failure are too high, so I really don't dare to do it." "I see." Juan Lizzie heard this and came to a sudden realization. Then he smiled and said, "The reason why fellow Taoist feels that the chances of success are not high isn't because you're not strong enough, nor is it because you're not strong enough. It's just that you don't know the exact method. I have a method here. If fellow Taoist cultivates it, you'll be 100% sure that you can get rid of that power." After saying that, Juan Lizzie smiled and waved his hand. Countless strange characters, runes, and diagrams flashed in the air, and then they shook violently. Then they suddenly shook and rushed into the divine son of Ti's forehead, instantly becoming his unforgettable memory. It was also at this moment that Luo Fan saw these words and patterns. This was not really because Juan Lizzie had sent these words and patterns after tens of trillions of years, but because of various circumstances, the divine son's memories of these patterns and words had resurfaced, which was why Luo Fan was able to perceive them. Luo Fan's eyes lit up when he saw these words and patterns. These were the things recorded in the information. It was a magic art, a seemingly simple magic art, but it contained the mysteries of another world. This method was a rune structure. There were only 3,600 runes in the structure. For a sage to be, such a small number was already an extremely concise rune structure. But The structure of these 3,600 runes vaguely gave off a feeling of power that Luo Fan had sensed many times before. It was a kind of neutral and peaceful power that contained endless destructive power. That was the power of demons. It was obvious that the rune structure in this method contained some mysteries of the demon realm. After understanding this, Luo Fan carefully analyzed this method. He worked hard to deduce the source of this method and the mysteries of the demon realm. The divine son of Ti obviously didn't think as much as Luo Fan. After receiving this method, he sensed it slightly and found that it was quite beneficial for dispelling the power that his son had suffered. He was overjoyed and bowed to Wan Lizi to express his gratitude. Wan Lizi smiled, waved his hand, and took a light step forward. His figure gradually faded, and in the blink of an eye, he disappeared without a trace, just as abruptly as when he came. After Wan Lizi left, the divine son of Ti sighed and said, "I didn't expect to encounter such an opportunity today. It seems that my son's luck is not small. Langjun, don't waste time. Quickly cultivate that method and dispel the power that my son has suffered from." The Lotus Leaf Fairy didn't care about the divine son of Ti's feelings. She urged. For a mother, her child's matters were more important than anything else. The divine son of Ti smiled awkwardly, sat cross-legged in the void, and began to circulate that method. He began to construct the rune structure in his body. The structure formed by these 3,600 runes was quite simple in Luo Fan's eyes. But for the divine son of Ti, who had come into contact with a sage-to-be for the first time, it was quite difficult. It took him a full 3 days and 3 nights to condense such a method in front of him, completely constructing the 3,600 runes. At this moment, the divine son of Ti let out a soft shout and stretched out a finger. On the palm of his hand, an indeterminately lengthened and contracted cyan light that seemed to have an infinitely complex structure, but also seemed to be extremely simple and pure. This light emitted an aura that the divine son of Ti was somewhat familiar with. It was an aura that he had always sensed in the other world, but vaguely, it was a little different. It seemed that the destructive force in this aura had been transformed into an extremely special existence by some strange mechanism. This is indeed the sage's technique. Just this technique alone is already so mysterious. The divine son of Ti exclaimed in admiration. Come on, madam. With this method, I am now 100% confident that I can completely dispel the power that has infected our son. Great. The Lotus Leaf Fairy was overjoyed. Do I need to lie down? The divine son of Ti shook his head and said, No need, you just need to stand properly. With that said, without waiting for the Lotus Leaf Fairy to react, he raised his hand and pointed. The method directly rushed into the Lotus Leaf Fairy's abdomen and disappeared. Then, the Lotus Leaf Fairy's abdomen began to shine with a strange light. This light vaguely formed the shape of a curled-up fetus. This light became more and more obvious and dazzling. In the end, it seemed to have turned into a sun and began to rise slowly. Gradually, it rushed out of the Lotus Leaf Fairy's head and floated in the air. After it left the Lotus Leaf Fairy's body, it suddenly shook and suddenly exploded. Powerful waves of energy spread in all directions from where the light was. The aura that belonged to the demon world first skyrocketed thousands of times, then gradually weakened and finally disappeared without a trace, as if it had never appeared. It's finally done. Seeing this, the divine son of Ti finally heaved a sigh of relief. The Lotus Leaf Fairy carefully sensed it and was also full of smiles. She was obviously very satisfied. At this moment, from within the divine son of Ti's body, the jade piece that Wan Lizi had previously sent over trembled slightly and suddenly fused with the divine son of Ti's mind. The divine son of Ti was shocked. He suddenly felt as if he had sensed the peak of cultivation and vaguely had some kind of vague but extremely real understanding of his future cultivation path. So it's a cultivation guide. It seems that the Grand Mist ancestor already had the intention to accept the divine son of Ti as a disciple. At this time, Luo Fan completely received all of the divine son of Ti's senses and sighed inwardly. Chapter 1092. In the time that followed, the divine son of Body's memories were very vivid. All the details were extremely clear. However, those were all things between him and Lotus Leaf Fairy. Things related to cultivation became very secondary. This was obviously because he had achieved all his goals, so his desire for cultivation was no longer that strong. What he wanted to do was to enjoy life. This kind of life went on for tens of thousands of years. After tens of thousands of years, Lotus Leaf Fairy finally nurtured the divine son of the divine son of Body to the extreme. She did everything she could for their son and finally gave birth to his son. After that, the divine son of Body had no mood to cultivate. He only wanted to play with and nurture his son. Just like that, his cultivation realm naturally stagnated. During this process, Lotus Leaf Fairy no longer suppressed her cultivation realm. Not long after the birth of her son, she also broke through the innate grand Luo realm and became a beginner sage to be. Luo Fan relied on the perspective of the divine son of Body and felt their life without any desire to cultivate. He couldn't help but shake his head. This kind of life might be pleasant for now, but once something changed, it would become extremely powerless. At that time, they would definitely regret wasting this period of time to cultivate. Cultivation, apart from being a means for those who aspire to reach the highest realm, was also a means for the weak to protect themselves. All living beings had to work hard to improve their strength and power. Only then would they have a chance to live long and well. Even if one's aptitude was not good and the results of cultivation were not very impressive, in the end, when the world changed, no matter how hard they cultivated, they wouldn't be able to increase their chances of survival. However, they still shouldn't give up on cultivation or giving up on hard work. After all, a little more power meant a little more hope, regardless of whether they succeeded or not. If they worked hard, they wouldn't feel regret before they died. The divine son of Body and Lotus Leaf Fairy completely forgot about everything in the outside world. They calmly enjoyed the wonderful life of their family of three. During this process, time passed by slowly. In the blink of an eye, 1,000,000 years had passed. During this time, the divine son of Body and Lotus Leaf Fairy didn't make much progress in their cultivation realm. Because of their nurturing, his cultivation realm improved tremendously. After 1,000,000 years, he had already reached the peak of the primordial pure yang realm. He was only one step away from attaining the innate grand Luo realm. However, it seemed to be a huge bottleneck that firmly locked his son's realm, causing his son to not feel the slightest bit of progress for tens of thousands of years. Under such circumstances, his son naturally became more and more agitated and in more pain. As parents, how could the divine son of Body and the Lotus Leaf Fairy bear the pain and agitation of their son? At that moment, the two of them continued to discuss. The child is now in a bottleneck. What should we do? Lotus Leaf Fairy said to the divine son with a headache. This is troublesome. Outsiders can only help with the increase in cultivation level. Even if we impart our own understanding to him, he still can't understand, and he still can't break through. The divine son frowned. What can we do? Lotus Leaf Fairy also knew this, and a helpless look appeared on her face. Sigh. Looks like I have no choice but to do that. Divine son of T sighed. The Lotus Leaf Fairy obviously knew what the divine son meant, and she couldn't help but look frightened. Is this really the only way? If he wants to break through, then this is the only way. The child has always been by our side since he was born. Although this method will allow him to have both of us to guide him and avoid many detours, it will also cause him to lack sufficient experience. The reason why he can't break through is because he doesn't have enough experience and his Tao heart isn't tough enough. If he still stays by our side, I'm afraid he won't be able to break through no matter how much time he has, the divine son of T said. Even so, the child has never left us since he was born. I'm really worried, Lotus Leaf Fairy said with tears in her eyes. For the child's future, there are some things that have to be done. The divine son of T was a man after all. For the sake of his son's future, even if he was unwilling, he still suppressed his emotions and made a decision. After talking for a while, the two of them found their son and told him about their decision. When the son heard this, he was overjoyed. As a son who had lived with his parents for 1,000,000 years, leaving his parents and living independently was a life that he yearned for. He had been looking forward to it for a long time. How could he not be happy when he heard that he could leave his parents and train by himself? Lotus Leaf Fairy suppressed the reluctance in her heart when she saw her son's joy. She nagged for a few days about various things to take note of before reluctantly sending her son away. A few days after he left, Lotus Leaf Fairy muttered to the Divine Son of Tea, "I don't know where the child is now, and if he's in any danger." Lotus Leaf Fairy seemed very regretful as she said to the Divine Son of Tea, "If I had known, I wouldn't have let the child go. I think there might be other ways to let the child become a Khanate Grand Luo." Finally, a few months later, Lotus Leaf Fairy suggested to the Divine Son of Tea, "Why don't we secretly follow behind the child and see what he's going through?" The Divine Son of Tea had been annoyed to death by Lotus Leaf Fairy for the past few months. When he heard such an unreliable suggestion, he said helplessly, "How is that possible? Our son is too familiar with us. He's almost telepathic. If we follow behind him, he'll definitely be able to find out. When that time comes, what's the difference between us being by his side? How can we achieve the effect of traveling? When that time comes, won't all our efforts be in vain? But the child hasn't become a Khanate Grand Luo yet. It's too dangerous in this world. If anything happens to him, how am I supposed to live?" Lotus Leaf Fairy said angrily. "Peak Primordial Pure Yang is already very strong. When I was struggling alone in this world, I had only just reached the immortal realm, but I'm still alive now. Don't worry, madam. The treasures we left with the child are enough to let him survive when he's in danger," the Divine Son of Tea said helplessly. "Umph." Lotus Leaf Fairy snorted in dissatisfaction when she saw that she couldn't persuade her husband. Every few months, a similar conversation would take place. Because they had to pay attention to their son's situation at all times and be ready to tear open the void to go where their son was at any time to protect him. The two of them didn't cultivate much when their son left. However, he still didn't cultivate. Instead, he spent more time and energy refining some spatial and defensive magic treasures. Such days went on for tens of thousands of years. One day, the Divine Son of Tea and Lotus Leaf Fairy suddenly looked happy at the same time. The Divine Son of Tea had a satisfied smile on his face as he said to Lotus Leaf Fairy, "Our son is breaking through to Primordial Pure Yang. Yes, I feel it too. I didn't expect to find the opportunity to break through in just tens of thousands of years. This is great." Lotus Leaf Fairy was overjoyed. Since her son was already breaking through, there was no need to force herself to ignore him anymore. The Divine Son of Tea immediately took out a magic treasure that he had refined all these years. It was a door-shaped magic treasure. It looked similar to the two space-time portals that he used to enter and exit the demon realm. Clearly, the Divine Son of Tea had imitated that magic treasure. After taking out the magic treasure, he poured his earth chi into it and activated the magic treasure's magical effect. In an instant, the magic treasure trembled slightly, and the surrounding space-time fluctuated and distorted violently. Then, the door slowly opened, revealing the scenery of another place. At this moment, the Divine Son of Ti's expression changed drastically. "Oh no, our son is in danger," he shouted and rushed into the door without hesitation. Lotus Leaf Fairy's expression changed drastically when she heard the Divine Son of Ti's words. She urged her body to rush into the door behind the Divine Son of Tea as fast as she could. As space-time fluctuated, the two of them had already crossed a distance of billions of trillions of miles. They arrived at a sea region. In the center of this sea region, a strange glow was expanding and changing. There seemed to be countless strange lights and shadows within the glow, as if there were countless living beings fighting within it. This is a heavenly sign of becoming a Khanate Grand Luo. Looks like it was triggered by the Divine Son of Tea, but from the looks of it, it seems that someone is attacking his son right now. Luo Fan, who was observing and sensing everything through the divine son of Ti's perspective, instantly knew what was going on. The divine son of Ti had cultivated the Tao of the body to the demi-sage realm, and the strength of his body had reached an unbelievable level. With a tremor, the surrounding void shattered inch by inch. His figure instantly traversed the void and crashed into the strange glow in the center of the sea region. As soon as he entered, he felt extremely comfortable, as if he had been cleansed by the glow endlessly and obtained great benefits. Although the benefits were endless, the divine son of Ti was not paying attention to them at all. Instead, he was paying attention to what was happening in the center of the glow. Over there, at this moment, his son was fighting with 6 or 7 people fiercely. Among the 6 or 7 people, there are not only pure primordial yang existences, but there is also one who was emitting the aura of a connate grand luo. The energy waves that erupted from him had also reached the connate grand luo level. How dare you bully the weak and ruin my son's breakthrough? Don't blame me for what I'm about to do. The divine son of Ti was enraged at the sight of this. He roared and raised his hand to grab at them. In an instant, his palm expanded madly in the air, growing to a radius of 1,000 feet. With a light grab, he easily grabbed the 6 or 7 people who were fighting with his son. Those people had the absolute upper hand and were about to completely kill the enemies in front of them. Suddenly, an aura that was so powerful that it almost made their thoughts freeze came. Then, a terrifying force acted on them, causing them to instantly lose their ability to move. They were directly grabbed by a giant hand. I'm Hua, the true lineage disciple of the river and mountain sect. May I know which expert is joking with me? One of the connate grand luo cultivators who besieged the few people shouted. River and mountain sect? The divine son of Ti frowned. The river and mountain sect was a rather large sect in this world. Its status was second only to the sects under the sages, and it was ranked second among the forces in this world. The true lineage disciples in the sect were at least connate grand luo, while the ordinary elders had reached the demi-saint realm. The strongest among them was said to be at the peak of the demi-saint realm. Such a sect was naturally nothing to the sects under the sages, but for the divine son of Ti, who had yet to become a disciple of a sage, it was a huge existence. For a moment, the divine son of Ti slowed down his action of crushing them to death. So what if it's the river and mountain sect? How dare a junior besiege my son? Lang Jun, crush them to death. Just as the divine son of Ti was hesitating, the lotus leaf fairy behind him screamed like a furious tigress. Her anger had even changed the shape of her voice. The divine son of Ti sighed when he heard this. He knew that it was no longer possible to reason with the lotus leaf fairy at this time. In addition, although he was a little afraid of the river and mountain sect, he was not so afraid that he had to swallow his anger. The people in his hands let out miserable screams, and all of them were crushed into powder in an instant. Their bodies and souls were destroyed. After crushing them to death, the lotus leaf fairy's anger subsided a little, and her reason gradually returned. Just now, he seemed to say that he was a true lineage disciple of the river and mountain sect. Is this the same river and mountain sect? The lotus leaf fairy asked with some apprehension. That's right. The divine son of Ti sighed and nodded. What should we do? The lotus leaf fairy couldn't help but turn pale when she heard this. What else can we do? Even if the river and mountain sect is powerful, he's just a true lineage disciple. But he was just a true disciple, and the river mountain sect would not waste too much energy on him. Let's see how our son is doing. The divine son of Ti comforted her. The lotus leaf fairy's expression softened a little. She nodded and turned to where their son was. At this moment, their son was closing his eyes and working hard to activate his power. His spirit, strength, and essence were constantly being sublimated. He was transforming from the primordial pure sun level to a higher level. Not bad, not bad. It's 100 times more powerful than when I broke through. It seems that our son's future achievements will be countless times stronger than mine. The divine son of Ti looked at his son's breakthrough and couldn't help but feel gratified. Of course, that's our son. Naturally, it's a combination of both our strengths. How can his future achievements be bad? The Lotus Leaf Fairy said with great pride. At this moment, a golden, auspicious cloud suddenly appeared in the sky. Along with the auspicious cloud came a terrible pressure that was so terrible that it froze time and space. This kind of pressure directly made the divine son of Ti's family of 3 stagnate. They couldn't even move, and even their thinking became a lot slower. This is the peak of the sage-to-be. Luo Fan instantly understood the source of this terrible pressure, but he was secretly shocked. Who killed my grandson? A furious roar rushed down from the auspicious cloud in the sky, shaking the divine son of Ti's family of 3 like thunder. The faces of the divine son of Ti's family of 3 turned pale, and they instantly suffered internal injuries. Even their son's breakthrough was interrupted in an instant. At this moment, the 3 of them opened their eyes and looked up at the auspicious cloud. They saw the figure of a Taoist gradually appear in the void. This Taoist had white hair and a ruddy complexion. The power emitted from his body almost formed a strange domain in the void. This domain happened to include the entire sea region, causing the divine son of Ti's family of 3 to be affected by this domain. It was as if life and death were an illusion, and everything had completely lost control. Are you the ones who killed my grandson? If that's the case, then you will pay with your lives. The Taoist with white hair and a ruddy complexion lowered his head and looked at the divine son of Ti's family of 3. His face was filled with anger as he shouted coldly. As he spoke, he opened his right hand and grabbed at the divine son of Ti's family of 3. At this moment, the pressure the 3 of them felt suddenly increased by many times. In an instant, the son of the divine son of T, who was the weakest among them, let out a blood-curdling scream. His entire body was completely crushed by the pressure, and his body and soul were directly destroyed. Seeing the changes in her son, the Lotus Leaf Fairy's eyes turned red. She opened her mouth and let out a mournful howl. The power within her body instantly exploded, and her spirit and soul began to burn in an instant. Her aura began to rise crazily. In the blink of an eye, she had grown from the initial stage of the sage-to-be to the peak of the minor achievement stage. She was even faintly advancing from the peak to a higher realm. This kind of amplification was unimaginably terrifying, but the price was her life. No! Seeing this, the divine son of T was both shocked and angry. He let out a mournful howl, and the power within his body increased crazily. His spirit and life source also began to burn in the process. No matter how much an ant struggles, it is still an ant. The old Taoist above shouted coldly and exerted force with his right hand. In an instant, the Lotus Leaf Fairy's body shook, and her entire body suddenly exploded, turning into nothingness. She followed in the footsteps of her son, and her entire body and soul were completely destroyed. Seeing his wife and son die in the blink of an eye, the divine son of T went completely crazy. He burned his spirit and life source in a frenzy to increase his strength. Initial stage of the sage-to-be, minor achievement stage of the sage-to-be, minor achievement stage of the sage-to-be, minor achievement stage of the sage-to-be. Still an ant. The old Taoist continued to speak coldly when he saw the divine son of Ti's actions. As he spoke, he raised his hand and exerted force again, grabbing at the divine son of T. He wanted to deal with him the same way he dealt with the Lotus Leaf Fairy. Chapter 1093. At that moment, something in the body of the divine son of T suddenly shone brightly, and an indescribable wave instantly swept across the divine son of T. Due to this wave, the space-time around the divine son of T became distorted in an unimaginable way. The wave was so mysterious that even Luo Fan could only sense that it contained a strange teleportation ability, but he was unable to see the specific mystery behind it. This is the technique of a saint. At that moment, Luo Fan realized. Such a wave was far beyond what he could grasp. At first glance, it seemed to be just a kind of space-time wave, but the more he sensed it, the more mysterious it seemed to contain. It also vaguely described the route of all cultivation paths, as well as some mysteries that belonged to the path of a saint. Seeing such a change, Luo Fan made a prompt decision. With a move of his mind, the entire world instantly came to a stop. It was as if the entire world had completely stopped at that moment. If this had been a real world, even a dream world, it would have been almost impossible for Luo Fan to do this. Even if it had been a world that he had created himself, he would have had to pay a huge price to be able to do so. However, this was not one of those worlds. Instead, it was an illusory world formed from the comprehension and experience of the divine son of Ti's lifetime that he had constructed the three-dimensional talisman. Everything in this world seemed real, but it was actually just the memories of the divine son of Ti. The thing that controlled these memories was none other than the three-dimensional talisman that Luo Fan had constructed. Under such circumstances, he would naturally only need to think about it. He would be able to stop the memories at a certain stage. In the eyes of this world, such a pause in memory was naturally equivalent to stopping time. Naturally, it was as if time had stopped. As time paused, the space-time wave that would have completely disappeared in an instant stopped. It turned into a strange wave that filled the void within hundreds of miles around the divine son of Ti's body. The wave looked like the ripples caused by a stone being thrown into a calm lake. The ripples became denser as they got closer to the center and thinner as they went further out. Luo Fan's figure directly left the body of the divine son of Ti. Floating in midair, he looked down at the seemingly simple ripples. It's actually so mysterious. It seems like I've finally found something good this time. Luo Fan's mind was filled with an inexplicable joy. The principles contained in these fluctuations were extremely profound, and they were not limited to the way of the body. In comparison, these were even more beneficial to the divine son of the body than the way he cultivated. After all, although cultivating the Tao of the fleshly body from 0 to the highest 9th step was profound, it was not a simple matter. There were countless benefits to him, but it was the Tao of the body after all, and it wasn't completely compatible with the Tao fruit Grand Tao that he cultivated. If Luo Fan wanted to obtain nourishment that was useful to his cultivation from it, he still had to go through many transformations before he could absorb the principles he needed from it. But the ripples in front of him were different. These ripples contained some of the most profound mysteries of the way of the saints. It was a kind of all-encompassing. It was an existence that contained boundless techniques and boundless mysteries. This kind of existence did not contain the profundities of a certain path, but the principles that reached directly to the source. For Luo Fan, this kind of principle was completely absorbed without any transformations. If he could comprehend some of it, he could directly integrate it into his Tao, fruit Grand Tao, and turn it into a direct force for his cultivation to improve. It could directly fuse into his Tao fruit Great Tao, and it could become a direct force for his cultivation to improve. Luo Fan stared at the ripples below, and countless complicated words, patterns, runes, and three-dimensional talismans flowed wildly in his eyes. Luo Fan stared at the ripples below, and there were countless complex characters, patterns, runes, and three-dimensional talismans crazily flowing through his eyes. The seemingly simple ripples began to change in his eyes, gradually losing their original appearance. The seemingly simple ripples began to change in his eyes, gradually losing their original appearance. The structure of these rules and laws was unimaginably complicated. Compared to the rules and laws of other areas in the outside world, the rules and laws that replaced the ripples were more orderly and vaguely more mysterious. Looking at the structure of these rules and laws, Luo Fan suddenly felt like he was looking at nuclear fusion or nuclear fission in secular science. It was as if an incredible power that didn't originally exist had been triggered during this process, and it had produced shocking effects. The changing patterns of the countless rules and laws were unimaginably complicated. It was the complete opposite of the seemingly simple ripples from before. The changes of each rule and law were extremely special, and they all resonated with the entire complex an unimaginably complicated structure. Any bend or twist of any rule and law was closely related to the entire structure. It was an inseparable and irreplaceable part of the entire structure. Although it can't compare to the rune structure that contained the aura of the Way of the Saints, it's not that far off. If I want to analyze it clearly, the time I need to spend will probably not be much less than before. Luo Fan roughly estimated and felt a wave of joy. After all, the complicated structure of these rules and laws was only the memory of the Son of God, and not the original body of those ripples. The fundamental reason why they were able to display such incredible mysteries now was probably because in the future, when his cultivation realm rose to the 9th step, which was the highest peak below the saints, he instinctively supplemented it with his own understanding. Under such circumstances, the mysteries contained in these rules and laws obviously couldn't compare to the rune structure of the aura that was directly inherited from the saints. However, even if it was only the mysteries that he instinctively supplemented, it was still based on the essence of these ripples. After all, it also contained a trace of the mysteries of the Way of the Saints, and it wasn't that easy to comprehend it clearly. That was why he had such an estimation of time. As for why he was so happy after the estimation, the reason was very simple. It meant that the mysteries that he could obtain from this would not be much less than what he had obtained in the past. As for whether spending too much time would cause his agreement with the Son of Heavenly Soul to take longer than he had imagined, that was not something he considered at all. For any cultivator, one's own cultivation was the most important. When there was a chance to take a step forward, normal cultivators would throw everything else to the back of their minds. Moreover, at this moment, Luo Fan was only wasting a little more time. Strictly speaking, it was in fact within the original agreement, so it was naturally not a big deal. After making up his mind, Luo Fan raised his hand and waved gently. In an instant, the entire world disappeared. Even the divine sun disappeared without a trace in an instant. In front of Luo Fan, there was only the strange structure formed by the endless rules and laws in front of him. After that, Luo Fan activated all the power in his body and began to memorize the endless rules and laws in the void. He tried his best to completely memorize the changes of each rule and law, although it wasn't considered difficult. However, it was an extremely complicated process. Even though Luo Fan was already a Dao master at this time, his observation, perception, and memory ability were many times stronger than before to memorize these rules and principles. Memorizing these rules and laws was not something that could be completed quickly. However, even though it was complicated, Luo Fan had no intention of giving up at all. He completely forgot about the passage of time in the outside world and was immersed in the endless rules and laws. Time passed slowly during this process. Unknowingly, 1,000 years had passed. On this day, Luo Fan's body shook. He suddenly woke up from the endless and never-ending process of memorizing. After experiencing the previous 1,000 years, he finally memorized the changes of each rule and law in the entire structure of the rules and laws that were formed by the wave below. Although it seemed to be just a wave, the area it occupied was only a few hundred miles. However, the number of rules and laws contained in it had reached an unimaginable level. This number, even the limit of numbers, could not be described specifically. With such a huge number of rules and laws, even though Luo Fan could easily withstand the information backfire after the entire era projection was destroyed, he still felt a little dizzy at this time when he completely memorized it. He felt that his memory and his mind seemed to have been completely filled, as if it could no longer accommodate any other information. It's finally done. Just these memories alone have already given me so many benefits. It seems that if I truly comprehend the mysteries within, the harvest will probably be quite a pleasant surprise for me. Luo Fan thought to himself. In the past 1,000 years, although he only memorized these rules and laws, he did not begin to comprehend them. However, just this alone made him feel that his compatibility with space-time had been greatly improved. He vaguely felt that it was more than 10 times easier for him to traverse the void and break through time than before. In fact, if he used his full strength, the speed of traversing space-time would be 100 times faster than before, and the distance would also be 100 times greater than before. Although such gains were not very important to him, there was no need to say what they represented, and it was enough for him to have such thoughts. With a slight thought, the rules and laws below began to change bit by bit. After slowing down their original speed by countless times, they gradually appeared in front of Luo Fan. If one were to look at it from the perspective of space-time fluctuations, they would see circles of ripples spreading from the inside out. After reaching hundreds of kilometers away, they would gradually disappear. Along with the disappearance of the ripples, the divine sun that should have originally existed in the center also disappeared. This process could originally be completed in an instant, but at this moment, after slowing down by countless times, the process had already extended to a few days. When this change occurred, the fluctuations in Luo Fan's memory also changed. In an instant, his face turned pale, and his body began to tremble. Enduring the countless rules and laws just now had already made him dizzy, and he felt that he could no longer contain any other information. Under such circumstances, the rules and principles were still operating according to an incomparably complicated pattern, and the amount of information was increasing by thousands of times. One could imagine how great the pressure on his mind was. The fact that his face had only turned pale and his body was trembling slightly was already a testament to his mental fortitude. A few days later, when all the fluctuations had spread and disappeared, Luo Fan thought to himself, starting from the moment the fluctuations began to appear. The fluctuations reappeared and continued to evolve at an even slower speed than before. Because he had already experienced it once, the slower evolution process this time did not make Luo Fan feel too much pain. Although the pressure was still immense, it was already within his tolerance range. His complexion also became much better. This process of evolution happened again and again. After over 100,000 times, Luo Fan's eyes lit up. He shouted softly, "I've finally found it. So the end of the thread is here." Luo Fan raised his hand and pointed gently. In an instant, he pointed at a strange point among the endless rules and laws below. If this point was placed on the circles of fluctuations and ripples, it would be a spot that was neither at the center nor at the edge, but in front of the divine sun. After this point was pointed at by Luo Fan, it suddenly emitted a strange light. It condensed into a thread of light and began to swim in all directions from this point. In an instant, it engulfed all the rules and laws and connected all the rules and laws together. It pulled these rules and laws as it swam outwards, spreading and constantly changing. In the end, this point went to the outermost layer. After all the rules and laws on the same layer dissipated, it suddenly appeared in the center of the rules and laws, which was also the center of the fluctuations, and began to continue to spread outwards. This cycle repeated again and again. In the end, when all the rules and laws had completely dissipated, this point of light finally disappeared. This point had such a change. What it represented was very obvious. This point was the key to the entire change of the fluctuations. After understanding this, Luo Fan immediately set out from this point and changed the shape of all the rules and laws, fixing this point in the center forever. He then changed the complicated relationship between all the other rules and laws and this point, transforming and finally forming a new form. This new form was that of a human. It was a humanoid figure with a medium build and looked a little thin, sitting cross-legged. The moment he saw this human figure, Luo Fan suddenly felt that in the depths of his divine soul, there was a faint imprint that seemed illusory yet real, gradually condensing. From this mark, there was an immortal aura that couldn't be worn down by even 1,000 tribulations. It filled his soul and caused his heart to tremble. This is a saint's imprint. In that instant, Luo Fan's eyes widened. He was both delighted and indescribably helpless. Saints were supreme existences that contained all the mysteries of the universe. Even their bodies contained unfathomable mysteries. These mysteries were something that those who had not become saints could not fully comprehend. Under such circumstances, as long as any living being had not become a saint, the moment they saw the figure of a saint, the countless mysteries that they could not fully comprehend would naturally be engraved in the depths of their spirit, forming a saint's imprint. For a saint, such an imprint was an extension of their path. If it was formed directly, it would naturally attract the saint's attention and draw the saint's gaze over. This was what Luo Fan wanted to avoid. Although a saint was omniscient and omnipotent, and if they wanted to know and understand him, it would only take a single thought. However, knowing was knowing. If he took the initiative to provoke and draw the saint's gaze over, it would be a completely different matter. For the first type, saints generally did not have any reason or excuse to do anything. For the second type, they would directly give the saint something to use against them, giving the saint a reason, an excuse, allowing them to do anything they wanted. The imprint in front of him was exuding a kind of indestructible and eternal immortal aura. It was very similar to the imprint of the saint in Luo Fan's memories. This made him suspect that this was the imprint of the saint. If this was the saint's imprint, then it was easy to imagine whose form the reconstructed human figure before him belonged to. At this moment, the seemingly illusory imprint in the depths of his godly soul shook slightly and suddenly gradually dissipated, as if it had never appeared. It did not leave any trace in the depths of his godly soul at all. At the moment when it completely disappeared, the seemingly illusory imprint appeared again, and then suddenly dissipated in the next moment. Just like that, the cycle continued without end. Seeing this, Luo Fan finally heaved a sigh of relief. If this imprint was truly formed, it might indeed be the imprint of a saint, but fortunately what I saw was not the real form of a saint, but a form formed by a certain fluctuation in the sun of God's memory. Perhaps the original appearance of this form is indeed the form of a saint, but since the Son of God did not recognize it, it can't be complete, Luo Fan thought to himself. An incomplete saint's form, even if it could form an imprint after seeing it, was not the real saint's imprint. Because of this, at this moment, in the depths of Luo Fan's godly soul, there was such a seemingly illusory imprint that was constantly being born and destroyed. This was the manifestation of wanting to form a saint's imprint, but not having enough stamina. Compared to forming a real saint's imprint, this kind of imprint that was constantly being born and destroyed at this moment was more useful to Luo Fan. It was not only because such an imprint was not a real saint's imprint and would not give the saint enough reason or structure to do anything. It was also because such an imprint was unstable, so the mystery contained in it would not be completely locked in the imprint. Instead, it would constantly leak out every time it was born and destroyed, thus allowing him to gain enough from it more easily than facing a complete saint's imprint. Chapter 1094. Luo Fan did not directly comprehend the brand that was constantly appearing and disappearing in the depths of his divine soul. Instead, he focused his attention on the human figure in front of him, which was formed by the rule of law. This human figure was very likely to be the figure of a sage. In this case, it was obvious that it contained incredible mysteries. However, the brand that was constantly appearing and disappearing did not contain all the mysteries of this figure. It was just the product of many mysteries that Luo Fan could not understand at this time. Even so, if Luo Fan tried his best to comprehend the mysteries contained in this human form, the mark of life and death in the depths of his divine soul would naturally become more obvious, and there would be a greater possibility of being comprehended. Looking at the human figure in front of him, Luo Fan seemed to see a strange world in a trance. There seemed to be hundreds of millions of profound and unpredictable changes happening in it from time to time. In this infinite change, he seemed to be able to find corresponding changes in all his cultivation, all his understanding, and all his experience in the past hundreds of millions of years. In fact, these changes even went one step further, revealing the profound mysteries that Luo Fan had comprehended in the past and his various experiences that he couldn't comprehend. Under such circumstances, Luo Fan was really enjoying it. He only felt that his understanding of the Tao he cultivated was constantly deepening, and even his cultivation realm was rising bit by bit in this process. This kind of experience where one could feel progress at all times for any cultivator. It was an extremely enjoyable experience. Luo Fan was no exception. He was completely immersed in this wonderful feeling during this process, and the passage of time in the outside world once again left him. At this time, his cultivation realm had already reached the initial realm of Tao Master. If his cultivation realm was to break through again, he would step into the profound realm of Tao Master and become a profound Tao Master. And the strength of a profound Tao Master was not just 1 or 2 times greater than that of a minor Tao Master, but thousands or even tens of thousands of times greater. A realm could increase one's strength by thousands or tens of thousands of times, so it could be seen that in order to cross such a realm, how difficult would it be to cross such a realm? Although Luo Fan felt that his cultivation realm was improving and that his understanding of his own Tao was constantly deepening, after more than 100,000 years, he found that his cultivation realm was still not reaching the profound realm of Tao Master, but was still at the initial realm of Tao Master. However, after hundreds of thousands of years, when he could no longer gain any more insights from the Sage Constitution, he found that his cultivation realm was still not at the profound Tao Master realm, but at the initial Tao Master realm. Although, after more than 100,000 years of understanding, his strength had made great progress. Compared to back then, his strength had improved greatly. At this moment, he could already easily crush his past self from over 100,000 years ago. But there was no breakthrough. He was still so far away from the real peak that he wanted to pursue. Although it is not the body of a body, it of the body is of the body of a saint. Tao body, Luo Fan of it. After comprehending to a certain extent, no matter how hard one tries, it is impossible to make any progress. Luo Fan sighed. His eyes narrowed slightly, and the incomparably mysterious world that was reflected in the depths of his pupils instantly disappeared, replaced by an indescribable profundity. At this moment, the body of a saint was no longer useful to him. He wanted to start to understand more mysteries. In order to gain more understanding, he could only change his direction and start from a mark that was constantly appearing and disappearing in the depths of his divine soul. Just when Luo Fan was planning to start from the imprint in the depths of his soul to comprehend again, the situation outside the small cave mansion he had arranged was completely different from that of hundreds of thousands of years ago. At this moment, the tree-shaped space-time was no longer as bare and clean as before. Instead, it had become a perfect, mysterious, and lively world. Although the size of the space-time was not much larger than before, it had faintly integrated with other spacetimes. The distance between the 36,000 spacetimes and the tree-shaped spacetime had been blurred. Those spacetimes looked like the kingdoms of the tree-shaped spacetime. Obviously, the connection between the kingdoms could not be as obscure as the connection between the various spacetimes. At this moment, at almost every moment, there were a large number of living beings shuttling between the branches, trunks, and leaves. They were either exploring everywhere or walking on the road from one kingdom to another. Compared to before, the 36,000 spacetimes had become several times more prosperous. The civilization of the entire dojo seemed to be undergoing some kind of extremely subtle sublimation. Luo Fan's small cave mansion was located on a branch where 2 branches intersected. It was very eye-catching and should have attracted the attention of many living beings. However, all living beings could not discover the existence of the cave mansion even if they brushed past it. It was as if this branch was no different from any other ordinary branch. It was so wonderful. Beside Luo Fan's cave mansion, an old man was sitting cross-legged. If Luo Fan could see this old man, he would immediately know that he was the incarnation of the teleportation tree gate's will. It was also the teleportation tree gate that had transcended the shackles of its body and truly obtained freedom, becoming a true cultivator. Obviously, over the past hundreds of thousands of years, the teleportation tree gate had long relied on repairing the 36,000 spacetimes to obtain enough merit to transcend the shackles and obtain true freedom. At this moment, the teleportation tree gate was sitting cross-legged with its eyes closed. The power in its body surged, and its cultivation realm increased bit by bit. Originally, the teleportation tree gate did not have the concept of cultivation realm. To it, because of the close connection between its body and the entire dojo, while it possessed all kinds of incredible power, it was also greatly restricted. It could not truly have its own power, nor could it rely on its will that had yet to transcend the shackles to obtain cultivation realm. Comprehension realm. However, this situation happened hundreds of thousands of years ago. After it completed repairing the 307th spacetime and obtained a huge amount of merit, an earth-shattering change occurred. At that moment, the merit he obtained fused with his original merit light wheel, and a shocking change occurred. It produced a strange power that directly changed the essence of his existence, causing his will to directly sever the connection with his body. This caused his body, which could only condense a half-real, half-illusory figure in front of Luo Fan, to directly become a real body of flesh and blood. As for the merit, it instantly condensed into a divine throne of merit, directly stabilizing his body and preventing him from retreating. He would never return to his previous state of being shackled again. The merit used to condense the merit throne was much more than what Luo Fan had seen in that space-time. The merit condensed by a greater consciousness was countless times more, and the essence of the two was naturally very different. In comparison, the merit throne of the greater consciousness was like a special seat for the head of a small family. On the other hand, the merit throne condensed by the merit tree gate. It was like the throne of the head of a country that controlled billions of families. The difference between the two was like the difference between heaven and earth. After his will broke free from the shackles, and he became a true cultivator, the Tao realm was produced by the teleportation tree gate, and it began to improve at an unimaginable speed. In just a few breaths' time, he had already advanced to the rogue immortal realm. In just a few breaths' time, he had already reached the true immortal realm. In just a few days, he had already surpassed the Khanate Grand Luo and became a primary quasi-sage. However, that was all. Although he had lived for billions of years and controlled unimaginable power for hundreds of thousands of years, he had only just obtained the Tao realm for a few days. Although his past experiences were useful to him, it was impossible for them to be converted into his Tao realm without any loss. To be able to become a primary sage in just a few days like this was already an extremely shocking achievement. If he wanted to improve quickly, it was almost impossible. In other words, after a few days, the teleportation tree gate that had become a primary quasi-sage would have to cultivate bit by bit like an ordinary cultivator if he wanted to improve further in his cultivation. This was obviously unacceptable for the teleportation tree gate that had crossed over a dozen major realms in just a few days. Under the conflict between the unwillingness in his heart and reality, the teleportation tree gate suddenly had an idea. He recalled some of the cultivation principles in the divine son of Ti's memory and knew that he still had a cheat that he could use. In his joy, he continued to repair the thousands of space-time under him and continued to seek for the merit that this place could give him. Merit was a very mysterious existence. It was not power, but it had a magical effect that surpassed power. It could give endless benefits to living beings, and it could not only allow the living beings to break free from the shackles. Allowing one's Tao realm to improve was obviously one of the magical effects. However, in the divine son of Ti's understanding, this method seemed to have some disadvantages, so it was not mainstream in cultivation. Only a few cultivators were willing to choose this method to improve their Tao realm. Although the tree gate of teleportation was aware of this, it did not pay too much attention to it. For it who had just started cultivating, the most important thing was to be able to improve its cultivation realm as quickly as possible. All other possible drawbacks were not within the scope of its consideration. In the following thousands of years, the teleportation tree gate continued to repair the remaining thousands of space-time according to the method that Luo Fan had used, and thus obtained the merit of this place again and again. As for the teleportation tree gate, because it no longer needed to use the merit to help it break through the shackles of its body, it completely used it as a driving force to improve its Tao realm. As it constantly consumed the merit, its Tao realm improved at an unimaginable speed. Just like that, until it completely repaired thousands of space-time and obtained the merit of thousands of times, its Tao realm had improved to the peak of great accomplishment sage to be, and was only a little bit away from the peak of great accomplishment sage to be. At this time, because the 36,000 space-time had reached a relatively complete state at the same time, a mysterious change occurred. The 36,000 space-time had some kind of strange resonance, and the connection between all the space-time began to deepen. The barriers between the various space-time were gradually mixed up. In the end, all the space-time and the tree-shaped space-time formed a stable channel, and thus became like this, as if it was a certain country in the tree-shaped space-time. Such a change caused an earth-shattering shock at that time, causing the living beings in each space-time to be indescribably terrified. It even set off a fierce war between each space-time and set off a reign of terror. Until thousands of years later, then it gradually calmed down and a new order was formed between them. Then, tens of thousands of years later, it became this prosperous scene before them. During this period of time, although the teleportation tree door had gained a lot, and its Tao realm did not stagnate, and it was still constantly improving, it could not break through the peak of great accomplishment sage to be. It was still a step away from the peak of great accomplishment sage to be. No matter how hard it tried, it could not cross this step. Why? I clearly know how to cross this step, and I even know what to comprehend in order to cross it, but I just can't cross it. The teleportation tree gate helplessly opened its eyes and sighed. Although it had seen the various changes in the Divine Sun's dojo over the past hundreds of thousands of years, it did not take it to heart. Even when the connection between the various space-time became closer, and because of all kinds of misunderstandings, there was a reign of terror. It did not care about it at all. From this point of view, it had become a true cultivator, and it completely regarded the improvement of its Tao realm as its most important thing. Taoist Luo Fan seems to be at the peak of great accomplishment sage to be. I wonder if he can give me some pointers. After sighing for a while, the teleportation tree door looked expectantly and anxiously at the small cave that Luo Fan had set up. In the past hundreds of thousands of years, Luo Fan's small cave was not hidden at all, and it was not disturbed or affected by any living beings. This was naturally because the teleportation tree door was here. The teleportation tree door was very dissatisfied with the progress of its Tao realm, and felt that it had been stuck here for too long, so long that it could not stand it. But in reality, its Tao realm was second only to Luo Fan in this dojo. Although there were many powerful living beings in the space-time, and some are even terrifying enough to reach the level of great accomplishment sage to be, they were still far inferior to him, who was at the peak of great accomplishment sage to be. Under such circumstances, the teleportation tree door only needed to move its mind slightly, and it did not even need to use any magical powers. It only needed to hide its aura, and it could turn the area where it was into a hidden area that no one could discover. I wonder what method Taoist Luo Fan used to comprehend the understanding and experience left behind by Master. It has been hundreds of thousands of years, but there is still no movement. The teleportation tree door once again raised the question that it had often raised over the years. Although the experience and understanding were exquisite and vast, it was after all just memories. Even with billions of years of memories, it would take thousands of years to comprehend them clearly. However, at this moment, Luo Fan had been comprehending in the small cave dwelling for hundreds of thousands of years without any movement. Moreover, there seemed to be no movement in the entire cave dwelling. How could the teleportation tree gate not be surprised and curious? Why don't I go and greet him? How about asking? Unlike the previous times when it was curious, the teleportation tree door had a strong impulse this time. The reason for this impulse was that it was already extremely irritated. It was very anxious because it had been one step away from the peak of great accomplishment sage to be for hundreds of thousands of years. At this time, it desperately wanted to have some accident to break this hateful state. Even if he managed to suppress it this time, next time, the time after that, or even more times, he would definitely be unable to suppress this kind of impulse. With such a strong impulse in its heart, the teleportation tree door no longer hesitated. He stood up and arrived in front of Luo Fan's small cave dwelling that was emitting light. With a slight thought, he raised his hand and pointed. A ray of light directly rushed out from his finger and suddenly poured into the small cave dwelling in front of him. The essence of this small cave was a mysterious three-dimensional talisman. The moment the spiritual light rushed in, the three-dimensional talisman naturally reacted and directly blocked the spiritual light. It carried out a variety of complicated analysis and then passed the analysis to Luo Fan, who was in the cave. Coincidentally, Luo Fan was planning to change the direction at this time and shift the focus of comprehension from the sage's body in front of him to the imprint in the depths of his soul. His mind was free, and he happened to receive the message from the three-dimensional talisman. So, it's Taoist fellow teleportation tree door. With a thought, he understood a lot of things. He took a light step, and his figure instantly disappeared in this void. When he reappeared, he was already in front of the two doors in the void. Then, he took another step, and his figure disappeared. In the blink of an eye, he had already appeared outside the three-dimensional talisman, which was outside his small cave. It turns out that Taoist fellow has already broken away from the shackles. Congratulations. Because I was wholeheartedly comprehending the experience and comprehension of Senior Divine Son, I couldn't congratulate you immediately. I hope Taoist fellow can forgive me. Seeing the appearance of the teleportation tree door, Luo Fan knew that the teleportation tree door had already fulfilled his original wish. Chapter 1095. After a while, the teleportation tree gate said, "I'm disturbing you this time because I have a question in my mind that I can't find a solution to. I have no choice but to ask for your advice." Luo Fan was slightly stunned. He didn't understand what problem the teleportation tree gate couldn't solve. In his opinion, the tree gate of teleportation couldn't be any better. He had just become a cultivator, but his cultivation realm had already risen to such a terrifying level. He was only a step away from reaching the pinnacle of the quasi-sage realm. And this was something that he himself had spent trillions of years to accomplish. Out of curiosity, Luo Fan said, "Fellow Taoist, feel free to speak your mind. If there's anything I can do to help fellow Taoist, I will not refuse." The teleportation tree gate first thanked Luo Fan, then told Luo Fan about its situation. In the end, it said, "I'm ashamed to say this. My cultivation realm is now stuck before the peak quasi-sage. I haven't made any progress in the past tens of thousands of years. As for me, I have already seen many concrete processes in master's comprehension and experience. But it's useless. I really can't figure it out. I hope you can teach me." When Luo Fan heard that the teleportation tree gate had such a problem, he couldn't help but be dumbfounded. He looked at the teleportation tree gate with a strange expression. After a while, when the teleportation tree gate felt embarrassed and wondered if it had said something stupid, it said helplessly, "I thought it was a big problem. So it's just this. It seems that you really need to strengthen your cultivation foundation." These words, although it was tactful, the teleportation tree gate immediately understood what Luo Fan meant. It was clearly saying that it needed a teacher, a master to teach it. After understanding this, the teleportation tree gate came to a realization and couldn't help but blush. Ever since he started cultivating, his strength had progressed at an unimaginable speed. In just a few tens of thousands of years, he had grown from a being without any cultivation to a peak sage to be. This was simply a miracle of cultivation. However, at the same time that such a cultivation miracle was formed, his understanding of each realm was greatly lacking. This kind of deficiency, he didn't think much of it at first. He only felt that his cultivation realm was enough, and he also had his master's experience and understanding. He didn't need to waste time comprehending those realms at all. He only needed to diligently pursue the advancement of his cultivation, and in the end, he would definitely be able to obtain a supreme breakthrough. However, after being reminded by Luo Fan, he realized that he seemed to have understood the various aspects of his previous realms. But in reality, it had not truly become his. His realm and his foundation seemed to be incomparably solid. In reality, it was like a tower in the sky that could collapse at any time. It seems. Back then, before I borrowed the power of merit to cultivate, it was already a sign that my foundation was not solid enough. However, I did not take this as a warning. Instead, I borrowed the power of merit for the sake of my cultivation. In the end, I ended up like this. With this kind of foundation, it's already a miracle to be able to achieve this realm. If I want to break through again, sigh. At this moment, the teleportation tree gate was filled with regret and hatred. He stood there in a daze. Looking at the teleportation tree gate's expression, Luo Fan knew that it had already understood his words. He didn't say much, but just stood there quietly, waiting for the teleportation tree gate to come back to its senses. After a long while, the teleportation tree gate's body shook, and its expression became resolute. It immediately knelt in front of Luo Fan and kowtowed a few times, saying, "I feel that my knowledge is insufficient, and I am unable to set foot on the path of Tao. Teacher, please accept me as your disciple. I will serve you with all my heart and never betray you." With that, it kowtowed a few more times. For such a sudden turn of events, Luo Fan couldn't react for a moment. By the time he reacted, the teleportation tree gate had already finished speaking and had already kowtowed a few times. Even the way he addressed Luo Fan had changed in an instant. Seeing this, Luo Fan hurriedly went over to help the teleportation tree gate up, saying, "How can this be? How can I be your teacher? Right now, you are just confused for a moment. As long as you clear your confusion, your future cultivation will be smooth sailing. Why do you need me to be your teacher?" I can't. It took the teleportation tree gate a long time to make up its mind. So how could it give up just like that? It knelt there and said, "Teacher, rest assured, I am absolutely sincere, without any falsehood. I hope you won't give up and accept me as your disciple. I will be grateful day and night." With that, it was about to kowtow again. Although Luo Fan's cultivation realm was much higher than that of the teleportation tree gate, and his strength was also much higher than his, the teleportation tree gate was in existence with great authority in this Taoist field. Without a life-and-death battle, it was extremely difficult for Luo Fan to lift him up. Therefore, he had to force himself to stop the teleportation tree gate from kowtowing. The teleportation tree gate didn't have to kowtow, as long as it expressed its sincerity. After being forcefully stopped by Luo Fan, the teleportation tree gate didn't insist, but still knelt there and refused to get up. It seemed that it wouldn't give up until Luo Fan accepted it. Things were in a stalemate just like that. Luo Fan couldn't help but sigh and said, "Accepting you as my disciple is indeed not virtuous enough, and I don't dare to do it. But since you are so insistent, I can't not repay you. How about this? I can give you pointers, but not in the name of master and disciple, but in the name of friend. What do you think?" The determination in these words was extremely clear and unshakable. The reason why Luo Fan didn't want to accept the teleportation tree gate as a disciple was because the gap between their cultivation realms was too small, which was a lack of virtuous enough. However, the most important reason was that he didn't want to teach the teleportation tree gate the true meaning of his worldview. In this universe, Luo Fan had only taught the true meaning of his worldview to one person, and that was the Martial Emperor. But that was because the friendship between him and the Martial Emperor was already very deep, and the Martial Emperor himself was already on the doorstep for him. It was only because he hadn't been pointed out, so he couldn't step over the doorstep. He couldn't bear to see him wandering there, so he taught him the true meaning. But this didn't mean he was willing to teach this true meaning to anyone. This wasn't because he was only a disciple, nor was it because he cherished his own things, but it was a necessary principle. Some things could be taken out and shared at will, but some things couldn't be taken out even if he was beaten to death. This kind of Tao true meaning couldn't be taken out even if he was beaten to death, since he wasn't willing to take out his most precious true meaning of cultivation. Naturally, he wouldn't accept the teleportation tree gate as a disciple. For Luo Fan, once he accepted a disciple, he would definitely teach everything he had. He wouldn't be stingy in giving anything that was beneficial to his disciple. When he accepted Hong Jun and the others as disciples, didn't he impart his most precious Tao fruit Tao without hesitation? The determination that Luo Fan showed at this time. It was directly felt by the teleportation tree gate. The teleportation tree gate was very clear that under such circumstances, if he still insisted, then the matter could only continue to be in a stalemate like this. Fortunately, he became Luo Fan's disciple just for Luo Fan's guidance. Of course, he wouldn't insist too much on the name of master and disciple. Therefore, he also agreed. However, even if he agreed, he no longer called Luo Fan a fellow Taoist, but called him a Taoist brother. But he didn't want to go against Luo Fan's wishes. But he didn't dare to not express his respect for Luo Fan. Although Luo Fan didn't think much of this small change in address, he didn't really care. Therefore, he let the teleportation tree gate's address be fixed. Holding up the teleportation tree gate, Luo Fan said, "Fellow Taoist, I heard you say that during cultivation, one layer transforms merit into cultivation. What method did you use?" The teleportation tree gate didn't hesitate. He raised his hand and pointed. A green light directly condensed into a piece of text and pattern in front of him. What was recorded on it was a very mysterious method that could transform merit, thereby increasing a cultivator's cultivation from another point of view. Luo Fan scanned through this method and instantly memorized it in his mind. With a slight thought, he had already roughly grasped the mystery of this method. Although he didn't go too deep, at least he roughly understood the principle of the transformation of merit. There's one more thing. I've given myself a name over the years. I'm called Muda. Fellow Taoist, you could just call me by my name in the future. The teleportation tree gate, which was Muda, said. When Luo Fan heard this, he was slightly taken aback. Then he smiled and nodded. The teleportation tree gate wasn't Muda's original name, but his original form. It was just that he had never said his name, so Luo Fan had always called him that. Now that he heard Muda's self-introduction, he naturally didn't have to be pretentious enough to call him fellow Taoist. Luo Fan looked at this method of transforming merit into cultivation and sighed inwardly. This method was indeed exquisite, and its use of merit had reached the acme of perfection. It was so much so that with Luo Fan's current understanding of this technique, if he had enough merit, he could use this technique to endlessly increase his cultivation. What this meant was very obvious. This meant that if he had enough merit, he could even use this method to directly attain the mixed essence Tao, fruit, and become a sage. From this aspect, it could be said that this method was a way to become a sage. However, Luo Fan only shook his head and sighed at this mysterious method. He was even a little disdainful. This was because this method had a huge drawback. This drawback was hidden extremely well. Perhaps it wouldn't be obvious when one's cultivation level was low, but when one deduced this method's progress to the extreme and reached the level of a sage, one would be able to see the drawback of this method. Sages were supreme beings who were omnipotent. They could even move about freely in the boundless state of chaos and live freely. Such an existence should be an existence at the level of a perfect heaven and earth. Its interior should be able to produce endless merit, and it could provide endless living beings with endless cultivation realms to increase their cultivation endlessly. For such an existence to achieve success, how could it be achieved by relying on any heaven and earth, even if it was the merit bestowed by the heaven and earth? From this point, it could already be seen that this method could not be justified at all. And if it could not be justified, it meant that this method had an extremely huge drawback. Or rather, it had an extremely shocking limitation. This kind of drawback, this kind of restriction at this moment, because Luo Fan had just seen this method, he did not delve into it at all. So for a while, he could not find out what was going on. However, as long as he knew the existence of this drawback, it was enough for him to give up on this method. You shouldn't cultivate this method. Luo Fan sighed. Ah, Muda exclaimed and said, "What do you mean by that, fellow Taoist? I see that this method is extremely exquisite and has endless uses. Why can't I cultivate it?" At this moment, Muda's expression had changed greatly, and he seemed very nervous. "Muda, you obtained this method. You must have obtained it from the memories of the divine son of Ti." Luo Fan sighed. "Yes." Muda nodded. "Then do you know if Senior Divine Son of Body used this method to increase his cultivation level?" Luo Fan asked again. This made Muda's expression change greatly. How could he not know that back then, Divine Son of Body cultivated the Tao of the body? He had completely relied on his own efforts to completely increase it. He did not care about merit at all, nor did he use this method at all. In fact, in his memory, there were even records of using this method not being appropriate. It was just that he was focused on increasing his cultivation level at that time, so he did not pay attention to these records. He simply did not care about it all. At this moment, after being reminded by Luo Fan, he then reacted. Back then, when Divine Son of Body had such a dojo, it was extremely easy for him to obtain merit. He did not even need to spend thousands or tens of thousands of years of hard work to obtain some merit. Instead, he only needed to think about it, and he would be able to obtain merit countless times more than what he had obtained in these hundreds of thousands of years. With so much merit, if he wanted to, it might be a little difficult for him to rely on it to become a sage, but it would definitely not be a problem for him to take a few more steps towards the level of sage. And under such a situation where he could obtain endless merit at his fingertips, Divine Son of Body still did not choose this method to increase his cultivation level. Even when he died in the end, and his soul dispersed, he did not change his mind. Did this not mean something? Why did Master not use this method to increase his cultivation level at all? Muda murmured, and there was already a look of panic in his eyes. As expected, it seems that this method does indeed have a huge drawback. From Muda's expression, Luo Fan already knew the answer to the matter, and for a moment, he could not help but secretly nod. Nodding, he began to think carefully about what the drawback of this method was. Thinking carefully, suddenly, a flash of lightning flashed across his mind. He instantly came to a realization. So that's it. I know what the drawback is. Before he had transmigrated, he had also heard of many myths and legends. Some of them said that someone had done something to gain great merit, and thus become a sage. Others said that someone could only choose to do something to gain more merit and become a sage because they could not walk down a certain path. At that time, he only felt that the legends were quite interesting and that the story was quite grand. But after he truly stepped into the path of cultivation and had a good understanding of the power of the sage, he then realized how ridiculous this legend was. Could the merit of a world really create a life that surpassed this world, so that it could still exist after this world was completely destroyed? How is this possible? Merit was an existence that was born from a world. It was not power, but it was more powerful than power. This kind of existence that was born from the world was, of course, closely linked to the world. Not to mention the destruction of the world. Even if you left this world, you might not be able to exist anymore. Since this was the existence of merit, then how could the strength that a cultivator obtained by relying on this merit still exist after the destruction of the world? How could it be possible to travel freely in the state of chaos? Therefore, it was very obvious that it was impossible to become a sage by relying on merit. A sage was supposed to transcend everything, to be indestructible, to be immortal, to be able to travel freely in the state of chaos, to be able to exist even after the destruction of the world. How could it be created by the merit that disappeared along with the destruction of the world? Thinking of these myths and legends, combined with his own understanding of merit, Luo Fan instantly knew the drawback of this method. The cultivation realm that is achieved using this method is not the cultivator's own cultivation realm. is simply a gift from the world. Once the world changes, these realms may be taken back in an instant, and everything that was obtained by relying on this merit will disappear in an instant. Luo Fan thought to himself, and an inexplicable expression appeared on his face. The reason a cultivator cultivated was to transcend. First, to transcend life and death, then to transcend fate, to transcend the world, and finally to transcend everything. With this as the basic goal, the more one cultivated, the more they would go against transcendence, and the more closely one would be connected to the world. How could they accept this method? From this perspective, this method of converting merit into cultivation was a completely useless piece of trash. Any cultivator who wanted to transcend would not cultivate such a method. It was no wonder that the divine son of Ti did not care about this method, and even laid quietly in the depths of his memory, allowing Mu to find it so easily. Chapter 1096. Luo Fan shook his head. What are the drawbacks of this technique? I hope brother can teach me. When Muda heard the words that Luo Fan involuntarily said just now, his eyes couldn't help but be filled with a strong hope. Although knowing the drawbacks and solving the drawbacks were two different things, knowing the drawbacks was better than not knowing the drawbacks at all. Luo Fan lightly said, "It's nothing much. It's just that if one uses this technique to increase one's cultivation level, it will cause the connection between the cultivator and the heaven and earth to become too close. As a result, one will be shackled by the heaven and earth, and it will be difficult for one to completely escape the influence of the heaven and earth." Hearing Luo Fan's indifferent tone, Muda was completely unable to be as indifferent as him. At this moment, Muda's expression changed drastically. How could this be? This was the only thought that appeared in Muda's mind at this moment. One must know that in order to break free from the shackles of his body and the Tao field, in order to become a true cultivator, Muda had spent a total of 7 to 8 trillion years. He had spent such a long time in exchange for the opportunity to become a true cultivator. However, because of that tiny bit of merit, he was once again shackled by this dojo and the world. One could imagine how great of a blow this was to Muda. Although there was a huge difference between being shackled by the heaven and earth and being shackled by one's body. No matter what, they were both shackles and had no freedom. What was the difference in essence? Muda, wake up. Seeing that Muda had suffered a huge blow, Luo Fan frowned and softly shouted, as if he had completely lost his will to fight. Luo Fan's shout used a wondrous method to shake the divine soul. This shout was like a warning bell ringing in Muda's ears, instantly making his whole body relax. He felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his heart, making his whole heart cool from the inside out, from top to bottom. At this moment, Muda's heart felt at ease. All kinds of negative emotions instantly broke away from the various kinds of despair in his heart. He broke out in a cold sweat after he had freed himself from his emotions. The situation just now was really dangerous. If he had waited for that feeling of despair and regret to penetrate into the depths of his heart, he would have died. If he wanted to expel it in the future, that would be 1,000 times more difficult. And if he didn't get rid of it, that was even more likely to cause his cultivation to be unable to advance at all. Understanding this, he couldn't help but bow to Luo Fan, repeatedly thanking him. Luo Fan smiled. Waving his hand, he said, "This is just a small matter. As for the drawbacks, you don't need to feel despair. Although this Taoist field is independent of the heavens and earth, it is still attached to the heavens and earth. The merit of the Taoist field is actually similar to the merit of the heavens and earth. You're shackled by the merits of this dojo, but in fact, it's not much different from being shackled by the merits of heaven and earth. In this way, unless you're certain that you'll become a saint in the future, it's not a bad choice to cultivate with the help of merits." Although these words were merely comforting words, they did make some sense. At least, for Muda, this reasoning was correct. Although the goal of cultivators was to transcend, to achieve the great cause of the supreme sage, since ancient times, who knows how many billions of years, who knows how many billions of cultivators tirelessly cultivated, in the end, only a mere 7 people were able to become a sage. The other billions of living beings all fell on the path of pursuing the sage realm. Under such circumstances, who could guarantee that they would eventually become a sage? Who had absolute confidence that they would be able to walk to the end? Muda was obviously not the kind of cultivator who had absolute confidence that he could walk to the end and become a sage. From this point of view, this merit was a poison to an existence like Luo Fan, who aspired to become a sage, but to an existence like Muda, who did not have much hope, it was the best tonic. When Muda heard Luo Fan's words, his expression became slightly awkward, but he quickly relaxed. As a cultivator, of course, deep in their hearts, they would have the thought of becoming a sage one day. Even the weakest cultivator, the same was true. Muda was naturally no exception. Under such circumstances, when Luo Fan directly said that it was impossible for him to become a sage and that this method of using merit to advance his cultivation was not harmful to him, of course he would not be very happy. However, in the end, he still had his rationality. He knew that it was almost impossible for him to be the most outstanding cultivator among the hundreds of millions of years. Therefore, he had no choice but to admit that what Luo Fan said was true. That was why he was embarrassed at first, but then he felt relieved. Luo Fan naturally saw the meaning behind the change in Muda's expression, but he did not take it to heart. Regardless of the process, as long as Muda calmed down in the end, it would be a good thing. Then what should I do with my current cultivation? Muda asked very sincerely. Luo Fan smiled and said, "Let's not talk about merit first. Although you relied on merit to achieve your current cultivation, it does not mean that you cannot continue to cultivate. It is just that your cultivation speed will be slower. Therefore, what you need to do now is not to find a way to break through to the next realm. Instead, you need to start again. Step by step, you need to walk through the cultivation process that you missed and make up for the cultivation foundation that you lacked." Hearing this, Muda's eyes lit up as if he had seen the sun after the fog had been lifted. Luo Fan's words directly pulled him out from the dead end of his thoughts, allowing his train of thought to flow smoothly. I see. That should be the case. What I lack now is the foundation. As long as I can start again, I can strengthen my foundation and make up for it. Then, won't I be able to completely make up for what I lack? When I return to my current realm, perhaps when the conditions are right, I will be able to break through the shackles and become a peak quasi-sage. At that time, even if I lose the merit to make up for it, it will not affect me much. Muda was extremely excited as he murmured. Luo Fan looked at Muda's expression and smiled. However, he did not say anything. He knew that since the merit had already fused with his cultivation, it had already become an inseparable existence. In the future, even if he achieved an extremely high realm, even if the cultivation realm that was raised by the merit was insignificant to him, once he lost the merit, it would be a huge loss to him. Even if it was unlikely to cause him to fall into oblivion, it could cause him to suffer irreparable injuries. It could even cause him to fall into a lower realm. In other words, if Muda was lucky enough to become a sage in the future and this place was destroyed one day, then it was very likely that he would fall into the sage realm. If at that time, he was walking in a state of chaos, then it was more likely that he would fall and perish. This was not an absurd conclusion. Instead, it was very natural. After the merit was fused with his cultivation, it had completely fused with his cultivation. And in the future, no matter how hard the cultivator worked, no matter how strong he was, the image of the merit could not be eliminated. In fact, it was the complete opposite. No matter how hard he worked in the future, no matter how his cultivation realm, the disappearance of the merit could cause unimaginable damage to him. It could even cause his cultivation realm to fall by a realm. This was not sensationalism. It was the real truth. In other words, in the future, even if Muda was very, very lucky, and became a sage, then the merit that he had obtained could have an extremely huge impact on him. If the universe on Earth was completely destroyed, or this place was completely destroyed, then it was very likely that he would fall into the sage realm. If at that time he was even unlucky enough to be walking in a state of chaos, then the result would be that he would be directly destroyed by the state of chaos and turn into nothingness, thus causing the fall of the sage. The reason for this was not complicated. Just like building a house, the foundation was the most important existence for a house. If the foundation was lost, no matter how sturdy or tall the house was, it would directly collapse. The merit, when it was used to promote the cultivation realm of living beings, had already completely fused with the cultivation realm of living beings. In this kind of situation, no matter how much this creature's cultivation realm increased, no matter how much it grew to an unbelievable level, this merit would be a flaw that could not be eliminated. That was because when the cultivation realm kept increasing, the cultivation realm affected by the merit would gradually become the foundation and become the support for the next level of cultivation realm. If one day there would be a problem with the merit, then there would be a problem with the foundation. How could the house still exist then? However, it was obvious that Luo Fan would not say these words at this time. The reason was not complicated, because it was already a fait accompli. Even Luo Fan could not think of anything else at this time. If he said it, it would only make him feel sad. Unless Muda could directly destroy the entire place, then he could eliminate most of the influence of the merit. However, that was only a small part of the influence. Previously, Luo Fan had already said that although the place was independent, it was closely connected to the earth in the outside world. Although the merit was produced by the place, a small part of it also came from the earth in the outside world. Moreover, it was an extremely crucial small part. If he wanted to eliminate this small part of the merit, he could only do it by destroying the entire earth. There was no other way. Evidently, with Muda's strength and cultivation, it was wishful thinking for him to completely destroy this place, let alone Earth, which had 7 great sages, countless pinnacles sage to be, and countless other places that were bestowed by the sages as the foundation. Therefore, it could be said that at this moment, Muda could no longer think of anything else. Whether he said it or not, it would not help his fate at all. Moreover, if he said it, the hopeless future might cause Muda to sink into depravity and completely lose the desire to cultivate and survive. Due to these considerations, Luo Fan only looked at Muda indifferently. At this moment, Muda was extremely excited. His face was filled with excitement, and his eyes were filled with longing. It was obvious that he was imagining how bright his future would be. After a long time, he came back to his senses and bowed to Luo Fan. Although I know what to do, I don't have absolute confidence that I can completely seal my cultivation realm. I don't have confidence that my current realm will not affect my recultivation in the future. Therefore, I would like to ask for your help to completely seal my cultivation realm. I wonder if you can help me? Luo Fan could not help but smile when he heard this. Sealing one's cultivation realm and recultivating might be very troublesome for others, but it was extremely familiar to him. He had tried it on himself more than once. Compared to trying it on himself, it was obviously much easier to seal someone else's cultivation realm. Therefore, sealing one's cultivation realm might be very troublesome for Muda. Even he did not have confidence that he could do it. However, it was extremely simple for Luo Fan. This is a small matter. Muda, when do you plan to start? Luo Fan smiled. The best time is naturally now. However, this doesn't seem to be a good place to cultivate. I'm afraid that if I cultivate here, there might be problems in the future because of other living beings' disturbances. Muda frowned. This is also a small matter. You can control this Taoist field to open up a cave for you, and you can cultivate in the cave, Luo Fan said with a smile. He thought about it. Luo Fan continued. Why don't I help you open up a cave? You need to recultivate. Not only do you need to cultivate in seclusion, but you also need to gain experience. If you open up a cave yourself, I'm afraid that it won't be a perfect place for you to train. Thank you, brother. Muda was overjoyed and thanked him. Luo Fan did not stand on ceremony. Let me borrow your authority. As he spoke, he pointed at Muda. In an instant, Muda's authority over this place was transferred to him. In an instant, he felt as if he had complete control over everything in this place. This was the reason why Muda had all the authority over this place. Wow, Compared to before, this authority has increased a lot. Luo Fan could not help but be surprised when he sensed this feeling of complete control. Back then, when Muda was still the transmission tree door and had yet to transcend the shackles of his body, Luo Fan had also borrowed his authority over this dojo. However, although he felt that it was mysterious at that time, and although he could do many things in this dojo, he was more of a bystander and did not support any real big movements. However, at this moment, not only could he sense everything in this place, but he could also modify and control it. This change was beyond his expectations. Logically speaking, the original Muda had fused with the entire dojo and was completely shackled by the dojo and his body. This caused his relationship with the dojo to be different. Normally speaking, he should have greater authority over the dojo. However, now that he had transcended the shackles, it was equivalent to breaking free from the connection between him and the place. In this case, it was normal for his authority to be reduced and limited. At this moment, Muda was stunned. It was too easy for Luo Fan to borrow his authority over this dojo. As soon as he finished his sentence, before he could even react, his authority over this dojo had already been completely borrowed by the other party. Although he felt that he could still take it back at any time, Luo Fan's ease and willpower of absolute suppression still made him inexplicably shocked. Is this the true strength of brother? He could even take away this illusory authority so easily. If brother Luo Fan wanted to deal with me, wouldn't I not be able to resist at all? Wouldn't my body and soul be destroyed with just one finger? Muda thought to himself and felt a chill down his spine. Originally, he had become Luo Fan's disciple because he had no other choice. In fact, he did not think that Luo Fan was much stronger than him in terms of strength. At least in this place, he was confident that Luo Fan would not be able to defeat him easily. If a battle were to break out, it was possible that he would die and Luo Fan would be seriously injured. However, at this moment, he just realized that his understanding of cultivation was still too little. It turned out that the difference in cultivation realms represented such a huge difference in strength. In an instant, he no longer had any contempt for Luo Fan. There was only a kind of admiration and admiration in his heart. Luo Fan did not care about Muda. At this moment, he was using the authority that he borrowed from Muda to sense the various aspects of this place. Compared to the last time he used his authority to see this place, there were many changes. The entire way of operation was many times smoother. Just by sensing the process of operation, he felt that it was perfect. The modifications are quite good. Even some small details that I did not think of back then were done quite perfectly. No wonder this place gave him more authority. As he sensed the various situations, Luo Fan could not help but secretly exclaim in admiration. At the same time, he more or less understood why Muda's authority over this place had increased so abnormally. If one contributed to the world, one would obtain the merit of the world. If one contributed to the world, one would obtain the merit of the world. In order to obtain the boundless merit, Muda really did not hold back when it came to the transformation of the place. Everything was done to perfection. To him, this would allow him to obtain boundless karma. However, to the dojo, it would allow the dojo to become even more perfect and complete. In this way, the place would instinctively feel that allowing Muda to obtain more authority would be beneficial to itself. Therefore, it naturally gave Muda more authority. Of course, the so-called place instinctively felt that it was also a form of existence similar to the will of the world. However, it was not the kind of consciousness and will that ordinary living beings could understand. After sighing for a while, Luo Fan calmed his emotions and used his authority to control the power of the place to change slightly. In an instant, a door of light appeared in front of him. Chapter 1097. In the end, the door of light became 10 meters tall. It looked extremely simple and unadorned. After the door of light took shape, it gradually became illusory. Soon, it completely disappeared, as if it didn't exist at all. Only Muda could feel that it still existed. In fact, It was even more real and clearer than before. After the door of light finished transforming, Luo Fan said to Muda, "The cave has been established. It's connected to the 36,000 space-times in the dojo. You can use it to project your projection into the 36,000 space-times in the dojo. You don't need the dojo's authority, and you won't be limited by your cultivation. It's perfect for you." Hearing that, Muda was overjoyed. "Thank you, brother." Hearing that, Luo Fan knew that Muda was quite interested in the cave. With a thought, he raised his hand and grabbed at Muda. In an instant, countless complicated and profound three-dimensional talismans appeared around Muda. They began to revolve around him in an extremely profound way. Gradually, Muda's entire body became illusory. Then, the three-dimensional talismans suddenly paused and shrunk inwards. They shrunk into Muda's body, fused with his body, and disappeared without a trace. As the three-dimensional talismans fused with him, Muda's aura, power, and cultivation gradually weakened. In a trance, he seemed to have become a much stronger mortal than ordinary people. Standing there, he no longer gave off the same feeling as before. As he changed, his appearance also changed. His appearance also changed. At that moment, he no longer looked like an old man. Instead, he looked like a handsome young man around 16 or 17 years of age. He had almost regained his youth. Of course, this wasn't regaining his youth. It was said before that a cultivator's appearance was born from their heart. How old their heart was, how old their appearance was. Previously, Muda had always thought that he had lived for trillions of years, so he naturally had the temperament of an old man, and his appearance naturally looked old. He looked like an old man. At that very moment, because his cultivation had been completely sealed by Luo Fan, his entire body and heart were like when he was just born. He was in an extremely young state. As a result, his appearance naturally turned into that of a young man. He looked at his body. He felt the change in his power. Muda was quite happy. He bowed to Luo Fan and thanked Luo Fan. Then, he turned around and walked into the seemingly illusory door. But in reality, it still existed. It was just a door of light that was hidden. He entered the strange cave. Seeing him like this, Luo Fan faintly smiled and waved his hand. His cave mansion made of three-dimensional talismans also disappeared, as if it had never appeared. He had used the same method he had used to deal with Wood Virtue's cave mansion, hiding his own cave mansion so that it would not be noticed by others. After doing all this, he lifted his foot and stepped into his cave abode, as if he had never been there. As for Muda's various problems with his cultivation, they had already been completely removed from his mind. There was no benefit to accepting Muda as a disciple. He did not need to put in too much effort. He only needed to do what Muda asked him to do, and that was enough. No matter what kind of problems Muda would encounter in the future, it didn't matter to him anymore. After entering the cave, Luo Fan did not hesitate. He stepped into the door that represented all the experiences and insights of the Son of God. He entered the boundless void where there was only a human figure floating. He arrived in front of the figure and sat down cross-legged, just like the figure, facing it directly. The eyes of a human figure were at the same height as his eyes. Looking into the eyes, he could see the depths of the eyes. Sitting cross-legged in such a posture, Luo Fan faintly felt an inexplicable pressure coming out of nowhere. He could not help but feel a little nervous. This was inevitable. After all, he already knew that the human figure in front of him was clearly the figure of a saint. Although it was not complete, it was still qualified to form an incomplete saint mark. Under such circumstances, if he were to sit cross-legged with the figure in the same posture, it would give off a feeling that he was sitting on the same level as the saints. Naturally, it would make him bear extraordinary spiritual pressure. Luo Fan could not help but smile bitterly to himself as he felt the changes in his heart. It seems that the authority of a saint is indeed deeply rooted in people's hearts. Even someone like me, who is bent on becoming a saint, has such a fear of a saint. Such a thought flashed across Luo Fan's mind. With this thought, he was even more determined to face the human figure in the same position. This was a baptism of the soul. He wanted to become a saint, but of course he could not have such a fear of a saint. If he was even afraid of the existence he was about to become, how could he eventually become such an existence? He did not follow his original plan to comprehend the life and death imprint in the depths of his spirit. Instead, he quietly looked at the human figure in front of him and quietly felt the changes in his heart. The imprint was born because of the human figure. And because the human figure was not the complete figure of a saint, the imprint could not exist for a long time. It could only exist for a short moment. Once his eyes did not look at the human figure, it would completely disappear after it disappeared. Only by constantly looking at the human figure could the imprint come back to life. Because of this, when he left the cave dwelling and went to meet Muda, the imprint in the depths of his soul had actually disappeared. Only when he returned to this place and saw the figure of a saint again did the imprint begin to appear and disappear again. As he comprehended his heart, all kinds of fear and dread that were originally deeply hidden in the bottom of his heart surfaced bit by bit. Some of these fears were because of the reputation of a saint, and some were because of the state of chaos. Some were because of his hatred towards death. All sorts of things gradually resurfaced in his comprehension. They slowly flowed through his mind, allowing him to understand himself better. From there, he realized the various flaws in his soul. I didn't expect that I actually have so many weaknesses. To think that I thought my heart was already perfect and flawless. Luo Fan smiled bitterly as he comprehended. Since he already knew the weaknesses of his heart, it was much easier to make up for them than before. Especially at this moment, the environment he was in was truly blessed by the heavens. It also made it easier for him to make up for the weaknesses in his heart. He was facing the human figure of a saint in front of him. Feeling the feeling of being on an equal footing with a saint, he recalled the various legends of a saint and the various powers of a saint that he knew. Under these two impacts, his fear of a saint, it gradually weakened. Of course, the weakening of his fear did not mean that he was arrogant enough to think that he could really be on an equal footing with a saint. He really thought that he could no longer be afraid of the power of a saint and could casually provoke a saint. Instead, he got rid of the mentality that originally existed. When he thought of a saint, he thought that it was impossible for him to defeat a saint. Instead, he thought that a saint was indeed unparalleled and that he would definitely be as powerful in the future. He thought that the strength of a saint in front of him would be his strength in the future. This change of mentality might not seem to change much on the surface, but in fact, the impact on him was earth-shattering. This change of mentality would gradually affect all his actions and all his thinking patterns, thus gradually changing his entire temperament. This was not an exaggeration. At this moment, he believed that the sages were his future, and the strength of the sages was his future strength. After learning about the theurgy, power, and techniques of the sages, he would naturally think about the principles behind such theurgy, power, and techniques, and how they could be achieved. Thus, he would unknowingly start to consciously get closer to it and consciously deduce the realization method of these divine sense, power, and methods, and then turn them into his own divine sense, power, and method. Although, with Luo Fan's cultivation and knowledge, it was basically impossible to completely deduce the true realization method of various divine sense, power, and methods. However, it was still not a problem for Luo Fan to find the right direction. And as long as the direction was correct, it was enough to completely change his entire temperament and make him look completely different in the eyes of outsiders. Feeling that his mentality was gradually changing, Luo Fan finally showed a satisfied smile. Under this mentality, naturally, all the various fears that he had before disappeared in a short while. For a moment, he felt that his entire spirit was perfect and flawless, and there was no longer any weakness. Of course, this feeling was quickly dispelled by him. He did not forget that not long ago he also had the same thought and what the result was. At this time, he had the same thought again. So how much better would the result be than before? He was even able to guess that he would definitely feel ashamed of himself for having such thoughts one day. What I have the most now is the sage's imprint. To realize this method, I need to completely integrate my body with the Tao that I have cultivated, so that my body contains everything about the Tao that I have cultivated. This is something that I have not done yet, Luo Fan thought to himself, and the Tao fruit great way that he cultivated slowly flowed in his mind. At the same time, his body gradually changed, and in a trance, he had already become a mysterious and unpredictable Daluo Tao fruit. Although there were 5 big realms, there were only the 5 realms in the process of the evolution from the innate Daluo to the Sage realm. Strictly speaking, they still belong to the category of the innate Daluo. Therefore, even though Luo Fan had already reached the Tao Master Realm, the Tao fruit that he cultivated with the help of the Tao fruit Great Way was still a Daluo Tao fruit. It was not the so-called Tao fruit of a Tao Master. The Daluo Tao fruit kept changing in the void, and in the process, it became more and more mysterious, more and more real, and more indescribable. It was a perfection that was beyond imagination, and it was beyond comprehension. It faintly seemed to dominate the Tao, and even the Tao in the unseen world seemed to tremble slightly under the Tao fruit, and it naturally gave up its own authority. This change lasted for more than 10 years before it gradually stopped. By the time it came to a complete stop, the Tao fruit had completely disappeared. In its place was Luo Fan's sitting cross-legged figure that floated in front of the figure. However, at this moment, Luo Fan's figure that was sitting cross-legged revealed an indescribable aura of perfection and dominating the Tao. It faintly revealed an extremely profound feeling that could not be described with words. He sat there, and in the blink of an eye, there seemed to be an extremely profound, indescribable Daluo Tao fruit floating there. Luo Fan moved slightly, and he let out a long sigh. Even if he moved, even if he sighed, his aura still did not diminish. Although it was slightly different from before, it was still extremely complete, and it was still dominating the Tao. It was still extremely profound. It still had a feeling that could not be described with words. It still made people feel like they were looking at a Daluo Tao fruit. In the end, there's still a huge gap. If I want to truly possess the characteristics of Saint, I still need to increase my cultivation realm by countless times. Luo Fan sighed. However, there was no shock in his gaze when he looked at the figure in front of him. Instead, there was a kind of longing, as if he was looking at his own future. At this moment, every single move of Luo Fan's contained all the principles he'd comprehended in his lifetime, and it contained his grand Tao fruit. Compared to the past, there was a huge difference. In the past, when he had just recultivated the Tao fruit that he had created based on a worldview of laws, his figure contained all sorts of mysteries of the Tao that he had cultivated. Any cultivator who saw his figure would be able to vaguely comprehend the Tao that he had cultivated. He could even leave his figure in the world of laws, allowing the creatures in the world of laws to comprehend all sorts of wondrous techniques based on a worldview of laws. However, that was merely a leak of the Tao that he had cultivated. Although it contained endless mysteries, it did not completely contain the Tao that he had cultivated. If a cultivator could comprehend the principles that his figure had revealed, they would only be able to obtain an incomplete Tao. However, the situation at this moment was completely different. At this moment, his figure contained all of his Tao, all of his principles, comprehension, and everything that he had gained from his lifetime of cultivation were completely contained in his figure, except for the abstract concepts that could not truly be manifested in the worldview of laws. In other words, if there was a heavenly genius who could completely comprehend all the mysteries of Luo Fan's figure, then he would be able to completely obtain all of Luo Fan's principles, all of his comprehensions, and all of his gains from his lifetime of cultivation. Whether it was the Tao fruit that had been recreated or the countless techniques that he had obtained from Panga's origin spirit, he would be able to obtain all of them without any flaws. In other words, if Luo Fan wanted to leave behind an inheritance, he would only need to casually leave his figure behind, and that would be enough. This change seemed very unnecessary. Why didn't he hide the things that he had gained in his lifetime tightly? Why did he have to display them without any scruples so that others could obtain them so easily? However, In Luo Fan's opinion, this was a matter of course. For cultivators, there was no need to be selfish. The true strength of a cultivator came from themselves, not from cultivation methods, not from mysterious techniques, and definitely not from magical treasures or artifacts. All kinds of divine abilities, all kinds of wondrous techniques, and all kinds of comprehensions that one had comprehended in one's life were actually secondary the moment one comprehended them. These techniques, and comprehensions would not be worth the heartache if they were given to others. Moreover, even if these things were important and irreplaceable, it would not have much of an impact if they were spread out. After all, learning the same things did not mean that one would reach the same heights in the end. Just like on Earth before Luo Fan transmigrated, what knowledge could he not find? However, how many of them could achieve great things in the end? Precisely because of this, Luo Fan did not mind displaying everything that he had cultivated, as long as it would benefit him a little. Now, Luo Fan had completely integrated everything that he had cultivated into his figure, but this was not just a display. In reality, the benefits that he had gained in the process were beyond anyone's imagination. After integrating everything that he had cultivated into his figure, Luo Fan's figure could be said to be the Tao that he had cultivated. Under such circumstances, his body had become many times more mysterious than before. The power that he could unleash with a wave of his hand was thousands or even tens of thousands of times stronger than before. At this moment, he did not even need to use his own powers to easily open up a universe, easily create countless living beings, and freely travel through space and time. Even if he were to open up the mysterious three-dimensional talisman in the cave abode that he was currently in, he would only need to use the power of his body, and he would not need to use his powers. Such a transformation was many times more profound than what he had learned from the Divine Son of Body's lifetime of experience and understanding of the way of the body. It could be said that to Luo Fan, just this change was enough to surpass what he had gained from seeing the figure of a sage through his experience and comprehension as a divine son of Ti.